and it's going to be an exciting meeting today. My name is Councillor Alejandra Bravo, and I am Chair of the Economic and Community Development Committee. We have quorum. I am now calling meeting 14 to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room 1. This meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto Council Live. As is fitting of a committee that considers the economy and community development, we are going to acknowledge the land that we're on. It's a meeting that we're meeting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, and we want to recognize that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and today is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And one thing I've learned about Indigenous knowledge is the economy is the way we take care of our responsibilities to each other. So that's my way of acknowledging this land. Also want to acknowledge all treaty peoples in the City of Toronto, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past. And today in particular, I want to recognize those who came involuntarily, particularly those people that were brought here forcibly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, which enriched many nations, but the trauma of which endures here in Toronto and Canada. We paid tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call speakers in the order they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Economic and Community Development Committee page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on CMP, the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are available to members if you need help with your devices. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at ecdc@toronto.ca to help with motions. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our meeting on May 29th, 2024, moved by Councillor Moyes. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So before we go to the agenda review, I do want to say that we have a very busy agenda with a number of debutants. I'll be reminding everyone to please stay within, to speak to the item that's before you, and we will do our very best to get through everyone, and so please be mindful of the 5-minute time limit, and I look forward to working with my colleagues. Before we do the agenda run through, I'd like to give an opportunity to Vice Chair Carroll to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, you're a very lucky chair. We're adding someone to the division that reports to us that is just a wonderful person to work with. And Councillor Fletcher and I will remember Karen Carter for her service in Heritage Toronto, but she is a leader in the culture sector, and she is joining us as our new director of, oh, here she is, you moved. She is joining us as our new director of museums and heritage services. And I was, yes. I was racing down the hall to get back to council last week when Mr. Tobin came down the hall with Karen and said, "Look who I have." and I was still thinking of the motion I was about to introduce and what we were going to do about that. But I then spent the weekend thinking, yes. And I'll tell you why. Karen's work is broader than just being a former Heritage Toronto director. That's a small little shop, but she's been big all over town in terms of being the one of the founders and the executive director of the Museum that I think a lot of you are familiar with because they've done a lot of visiting. Also a co-founder of the Black Artist Network and network and dialogue. And in that capacity, really broadening the imprint across the city of Black cultural exercises. A lot of the animation that we see happening now at the NIA Center, we can point to some of the work that Karen has done in the community. And our museum and heritage services are very community-based things, stretching right out into the suburbs, tiny from the big things to the tiny things. My little Zion schoolhouse, things like that. And so having somebody with a really broad overview of the city, I think, is really going to serve us well. So, Madam Chair, lucky you. You have another great director in our division.
Thank you so much, Councillor Carolyn. You are so very welcome. Thank you for being here, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to recognize you. Any other speakers on this? No? Wonderful, thank you. So we are going to move now to the agenda run-through. EC 14.1, a framework to advance inclusive economic development in Toronto. I'm holding that for speakers. EC 14.2, Night Economy Manifesto. I'm going to be deferring this item. We're going to pull it up now. There are speakers, so we've let them know that we're deferring.
You could just defer.
We're just going to defer it. Okay? The speakers have been notified. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. EC 14.3, supporting diverse and inclusive theater performances. Would anyone like to move that motion? Moved by Deputy Mayor Malik. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. EC 14.4, application to the Imagination, Manufacturing, Innovation, and Technology Property Tax Incentive Program. Would anyone like to move that? Moved by Vice Chair Carroll. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. EC 14.5, intention to designate the Upper Avenue Business Improvement Area. That moved by Councillor Moyse. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. EC 14.6, changes to Business Improvement Area Board of Management. Would anyone like to move that? Moved by Vice Chair Carroll. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. EC 14.7, targeted expansion of the Association of Community Centers to support community development in Toronto. Yeah, held by Deputy Mayor Malik. EC 14.8.
I do have an amendment. I could either hold it or I could just move the amendment.
The Downtown East Action Plan we're holding for speakers.
Okay.
Okay, Downtown East Action Plan implementation update and 2025 to 2030 action plan is held for speakers. EC 14.9, Toronto Fire Services Career Pathways for Toronto Community Housing Residents.
I'll hold that.
Held by Councillor Fletcher. EC 14.10, Toronto Fire Services 2023 Annual Report. I'd like to move that. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. EC 14.11, adding ITM Thai Massage Alumni Association to Chapter 545, licensing Appendix L list of professional holistic associations. Would you like to move that, Councillor Moyse? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. EC 14.12, Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Implementation Roundtable Update. That's held for speakers. EC 14.13, use of city parks by schools in Scarborough North, Ward 23. We have visiting Councillor Jamal Myers, the local councillor, and I believe that you would like to say a few words before we move on to adoption of this item.
Thank you, Chair Bravo. So the purpose of my motion is to create a discussion table to give an opportunity for collective conversations about the possibilities to make the best use of public spaces, parks, and schools in my ward of Scarborough North. The City of Scarborough designed our parks and schoolyards as public assets, allowing students increased access, but also to create more opportunities for growing community identity. And actually, when I pulled up the Scarborough official plan back from 1976, I found this line that parks, contiguity with neighborhood public schools is desirable for the mutual extension of recreational opportunities and the generation of a neighborhood identity. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with this motion. So I recently visited RV Burgess Park, which is a school adjacent to the park. Within the park itself, there were kids playing soccer and on a splash pad, while the park cafe was open for business, complete with a community tandoori oven. The feeling I had while visiting this park and seeing so many people enjoying different activities at the same time was a public space that had a true sense of community identity. I also recently learned that the school boards and city staff in PF&R have a great relationship, which I'm confident can only continue to grow through a formal discussion table. Coming together as city staff, school boards, and the community will allow for public parks in my ward to give the community a sense of pride and accomplishment when they visit public spaces that reflect their community while increasing opportunities for recreation and well-being year-round.
Thank you. We have some questions of the mover, I believe.
Who is the mover of the motion?
Well, the questions would be to Councillor Myers, and he's asked for us to move it on his behalf. You have questions of staff or of the mover?
Sorry, that was the,
I mean, of the, yes.
and now it's on the agenda.
No, this was submitted previously, so it is on the agenda if we move it here. So if you have questions of the visiting counselor, we can then, he can go and then we can have our discussion. Okay, so you, so you're going to hold it for questions of staff, Councillor Fletcher? Yeah, so I'm going to move to add it to the agenda. I'm going to move this motion on his behalf for the discussion of the committee. You will hold it for questions of staff, but Councillor Carroll has questions of the mover now, and then he will be leaving.
So are you moving this onto the agenda?
It's
The
already
item is already on the agenda.
submitted it before.
It was submitted in advance. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Carroll, questions of the mover.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is going to come up in questions of staff as well. I'm wondering why this isn't a matter that goes to the joint committee that we have with the school board, because it looks like we're setting up a way of doing things, but that would have citywide benefit, but we're just setting it up for one special area. Why wouldn't you take it to the joint committee of council and board, so that if it's a good idea, it's a good idea across the board?
So that was actually our first thought, and we did actually take it to that committee, and then in discussion with staff, they said it should come to this committee. So originally, we were going to the joint committee with the school boards and the city, chaired by Councillor Candival, and in discussion with staff, so we worked with the staff on this, they said this would be the more appropriate committee.
Okay, because perhaps I anticipate it could result in costs or something like that, and then that committee has no purview over budgetary items.
I think that was part of it, and I think there was just also, yeah, that committee didn't maybe have the proper jurisdiction over what we were talking about, because we were looking at specifically at parks a lot. Like, I think your ward is the same, where a lot of the parks are designed next to schools.
Yeah,
So-
North York and Scarborough. Well, I like to think Scarborough copied us, but that's just me. Yeah, okay. That gives us a start for asking questions to staff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions of the mover?
Yes, I will ask. I think it's a great idea, but you're aware that when Mike Harris changed the funding formula in the year 2000, that he essentially split off the city and the school boards from the mutual things that happened. So I'm sure you're aware that in the past, the city would be mowing the school board yards and the school board would be mowing the parks, because they were basically jointly operated at that time. And you're looking now at a model that would try to bring us closer. Do you have any licenses with any of your parks that are beside a school through the park that the school uses, or what's currently the relationship, a structural relationship in your ward?
So thank you for the question. Actually, we're working, so one of the schools in my ward, Whitehaven Park, is next to Whitehaven Public School. A few years ago, the city tore down the public park, and it rebuilt another park, which is a bit away, but unfortunately, they built that for a younger demographic of children.
Is this a playground or a park you're talking about?
Playground. It's a park, but there was a playground
Correct. You don't
structure
tear
in
a
it,
park
but it was, the playground structure that previously existed was acceptable for kids from grades 1 to 8, whereas the one they rebuilt is more for younger kids. So right now, there is a sand pit right next to the schoolyard, and the older kids don't really have a lot to do in the park. So what we've actually done is we've been working with staff to create some sort of like gathering place for older kids that they can sit, benches, things like that, trees, mulch, sitting stones, and so that was kind of the idea, but then
Sorry, is this a park, or it belongs to the school, or belongs to the city?
it's a park that if you were a member of the public, you would just see a park, but if you look at the dividing line, there's the school, and then there's a city park. And the city tore down the playground area on the city
I'm
park
hearing that.
property.
Right.
And they rebuilt it, but they rebuilt it for younger kids in
No,
another
I
park.
hear that. It's just whose property are we talking about?
We're
is my
talking about
question.
the city's property.
City property.
Yes,
So you have the ability to put those features in the city park.
correct. But we also want to make sure that when the kids are actually in school, that they can use this play area.
Do they use it already?
No, there's nothing there. It's just
Oh, I see, but
grass.
they use the park.
They use the park,
So
but
is
they're
there a
not
license
technically allowed to
agreement?
use the park.
They're not technically allowed to use the park. We'll ask
Yes.
staff, because there's no license agreement. That's ridiculous that they're not able to use the park. They use them everywhere. So that's a problem in Scarborough, not in many other places.
Well, it's a problem in my ward. I can't say if it's a
So
problem.
you're going to fix it. Good for you.
I'm going to try to fix it.
Oh, you'll fix it. I'll help you if you want.
Questions of the mover? Of the visiting counselor and local counselor? No, so that's being held for questions of staff. Thank you, Counselor Myers, for visiting committee. We're going to move on to EC 14.1, a framework to advance inclusive economic development in Toronto, and we have a deputant, Ingrid Boudet. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Sorry, what number are we on?
I don't have a presentation. This was kind of a last-minute thing, so I'm just going to read out here. My name is Ingrid Boudet. I'm founder of No More Noise Toronto, a grassroots organization that advocates for a better-sounding Toronto through data and process-oriented approach. I'd like to offer my thoughts on this framework to advance inclusive economic development in Toronto as it pertains to the night economy. A definition of the night economy I heard was anything not 9 to 5, which is broad and inclusive. The night economy has been suffering since before the pandemic, and there's a worldwide movement to support it. However, our concern that our development of the night economy must be wider and offer more choices than scenes which need loud sound and alcohol to be profitable. Of the three pillars of the proposed IED framework, inclusive entrepreneurship and asset ownership is one that could provide the night economy what it needs. We encourage the city to work with stakeholders and community groups to advance inclusive economic development with the objective that economic opportunities and outcomes improve across Toronto's population. Alcohol sales in Canada per capita have declined since 2009. So support of alcohol sales and those establishments that survive on alcohol sales is clearly not sustainable. I have a chart that you will be able to see in the documentation. As we have many new residents from different countries, we need to understand what they want to do when they're not working. Many equity-deserving groups, as well as many others, it seems, do not need or want alcohol to have a good time. In the report, it states that the IED could focus on specific industries, and I put forward that they focus on economic development for the night economy. This industry can provide skill development, asset ownership, and entrepreneurial opportunities for small and medium businesses that host communities are proud to have as neighbors and where there is mutual benefit. As the report states, economic growth has not been equally or equitably shared. When people make less money, they have less discretionary funds, they're working more, often in poorer health, which again reduces disposable income to spend. We need to support these equity-seeking groups and provide good jobs that are rewarding and fulfilling. More low-paying, precarious, service-based jobs is not what we need. Let's develop film, music, and culture and all of the support businesses that those industries need. While there may not be a recognized process that outlines when and where local economic development strategies should be developed and implemented, nor is there an established playbook of studied and broadly understood policy, this is where the opportunity lies. This is where we can be creative and find unique opportunities and small and large businesses that thrive, that make our neighborhoods vibrant places to live and work. So think creatively, involve community groups and stakeholders to advance economic development and at the neighborhood level to understand what each community wants and needs, and to include that in the action plan for the Toronto economy. Only together can we protect the night and the day and make Toronto a vibrant destination that is healthy and beneficial for everyone. And as I just have a couple more minutes, I'd like to say that I'm kind of disappointed that we cannot speak on the Night Economy Manifesto. Two of us have prepared. We spent hours. I've got charts, I've got data to present to you about how Councillor Malik's ward has the most exemptions, how the establishments have.
Can you speak to the item before?
I know, I'm sorry, but it was disappointing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none, thank you for being here. I want to make sure that members of committee have seen the letter that I submitted, and I want to ask if there are any questions of staff. Yes, and the letter, which I will be moving. Councillor Fletcher.
I think that, and this is asking this to come back, but in our inclusive economic development, I'm not sure that we have the kind of broad focus that we might need in ensuring that all of our big city jobs are inclusive. And so I'm looking at parks, forestry, and recreation, where local community hiring should be a focus. I'm looking at Toronto community housing, where local hiring should be a focus. I'm very happy that we have finally the agreement to advance a number of young people from Toronto community housing into firefighting that we'll be looking at later. But size matters, as we used to say at the school board, where we have very large purchasing opportunity. So that includes on our hiring policy, that includes in our deployment policy, that includes our community benefits policy. So inclusive economic development is a very broad palette. And I appreciate the fact that I think I was asking a question, how much further do we need to go in ensuring that we tick all of those boxes and put them front and center when we're looking at hiring? And I don't know who can answer because it's a pretty big question. Oh, it's going to be Mr. T.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Fletcher. Through Chair Bravo to you. Yes, this report suggests the city should use all levers at its disposal, be it land use planning, regulatory environment, taxation, granting, policymaking, and procurement in order to deliver on a more equitable economy for Toronto. That has included an increasing focus on the city as employer, such as you've raised here before with respect to today discussion of hiring in fire services. My colleague, Mary Madigan Lee, our Chief People Officer, is here with me and may wish to expand on the city's efforts towards more equitable hiring.
Thanks, Pat, through the chair, Chair Bravo. The city continues to try to have outreach and inclusive hiring as much as possible. One of our endeavors right now is to properly and adequately have data that we can track and integrate into our hiring processes, audit our interviews and interview structures going on, and very consciously making sure that we are a proper reflection of the community of Toronto.
For all the large employers, how will that be communicated to them? So in the past, in North York, the hiring was so local. That was the recreation hiring. And I think Councillor Carroll knows about that. It was a policy, actually, of North York Recreation to hire locally, bring kids in from the community. I don't think that survived. It's not just, it's also got to do with policy and bringing people up that live there. Is that not going to be part of our inclusive economic policy?
Through Chair Bravo to you, Councillor Fletcher, yes, it will be. In a couple of examples, this report proposes a framework that would be applied at a local level, such as you're describing, through the encouragement of community development plans, such as accompanied the Downs View plan recently passed by council, which talked about local hiring and good job targets as community benefits from that development. As another note, our colleagues in Toronto Employment and Social Services who helped prepare this report will be doing more targeted analysis on workforce development to try to inform the development of such plans.
I don't think there's a reason to wait for this. I'm just going to ask Mr. Dayton about the hiring policy for recreation and what it currently is and what your percentage of local hires for areas and local deployment. Do you have those numbers?
Through the chair, we don't have those numbers currently. That would be something we would follow up with. Certainly, we have local hiring initiatives, but what we are...
But you don't track it.
By postal code, in terms of who is hired locally to work at a local recreation center, that hasn't been a tracking process.
You haven't tracked it.
We are going to implement a tracking methodology to understand what our sort of local hiring impact is and where those gaps and opportunities.
So if we were asked, I don't think it's a framework. I think it's actually a transaction. I think it's something that could be done right away, not wait. And so I think I'm going to ask that for you, Madam Chair, and ask you to prepare that and not go forward. Let's look at your history in hiring locally. Maybe it's great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have no idea.
We're happy to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, just mindful of time.
Yes, I'm very
Thank you.
mindful.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Thanks. Are there any other questions of staff? Vice Chair Carroll.
So I think the reason we're nervous when we see the word framework is sometimes we set a framework and then the framework seems to take 2-3 years for implementation. So like we have an outline in the report now of what's going to happen, but do you have in your mind a timeline, or for instance, tracking local hires? Do you have, are there targets and goals by which you expect to be better informed in these things, be able to track such things, or is it something that's going to require a reconstructive tech to make happen? What's the overall timeline of getting this in place so that we can say the framework is actually functioning?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Carroll, the letter from the chair to committee talks about a deferral of the item to November 26. Over the course of that time, we'll be able to work on multiple fronts, including consultation with community organizations who do the work on the ground of generating more inclusive economic development. We'll also be able to refine the approach to metrics that this committee has discussed in the past. And as Councillor Fletcher noted, it would allow for us to look at the city as employer as another tool to advance more inclusive economic opportunity.
So if we defer to that time, that the metrics will be more clear as to how you intend to be able to collect them. If you're developing partnerships, the framework will turn into more of a where you would start to implement a partnership. I'm asking because in a way it relates to Councillor Murray's motion that he submitted, you know, when you go to start to animate something and get something going in a neighborhood, and especially if it's something that's going to lead to some leadership employment, you know, how soon will we, are we going to end up with a roadmap here so that we're not all just ping-ponging around trying to figure out how we do it, but there will be an actual roadmap that says, there's an opportunity here. How do we make sure that the people who need those opportunities get there? Will we, by deferring it, do we get that kind of clarity so that there's a real roadmap that not only counselors, but you know, businesses and NGOs in neighborhoods can begin to access and use it? Is that anticipated to be usable when we get into 2025?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Carroll, the deferral will allow for work on a few fronts that this committee has discussed. So one is clearer accountability among divisions, which was requested. The second was clearer metrics and a reliable means to track those longitudinally using credible objective third parties as well. And the third would be to be more informed by existing good practice in community.
Okay, and then one more question, because if we're going to defer this till November, we'll also see the broader economic action plan coming forward, which will have a series, and it will have a series of future actions. So can the actions here be sort of folded in so it becomes clear that that also informs the broader plan?
Yeah, through the chair to you, Councillor Carroll, the first recommendation in the report encourages the development of the action plan to use this framework.
Right, okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. And I had time to read your letter. It's such a long letter.
Are there any other questions of staff? I have a couple of questions, building on the questions of other members of committee, my colleagues. The timing of, in November will allow, can you confirm that it will allow for, as the Vice Chair said, for this to be embedded or grow alongside with the action plan for Toronto's economy?
To you as Chair, Councillor Bravo, yes.
And some of the conversations and the questions that we had previously at committee had to do with the question of the scope. Is it accurate to say that should what I'm moving be adopted, we would then be able to look at all of the different levers that the city employs to remove barriers for economic participation to members of our communities in Toronto?
To you as Chair, Councillor Bravo, yes, and the committee's been clear about wanting to see more, particularly as the city as purchaser, through our social procurement policies and how those might be tracked here, but also as noted today, city as employer.
Is it also, through the work of speaking to staff, I understand that there is a community economic development table or discussions that are happening across division. Is that something that this process can build from and on?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there is an existing community economic development working group that is trying to figure out how to advance using all those levers, and this work will need to build from there in the framework.
So essentially by refocusing and ensuring the breadth of levers the city has, we will be actually building on the work that's already been done, and there has been some convening already among city divisions, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. In terms of the question around the scope, there was a lot of interest in the committee in making sure that some of the divisions that weren't previously named when this came earlier this year, that it would include divisions like Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, and that there would be a view to agencies, boards, and commissions of the city. This is something that we will be doing, correct, under the reframe.
Through you as Chair, that's correct.
And then finally, I want to ask about the concept of community development and community economic development. Can you confirm that good practices include turning to the organizations and representatives of people who are themselves seeking inclusion in the economy to be part of describing the problem, finding solutions, and then monitoring progress when those solutions come forward?
Through you as Chair, Councilor Bravo, yes, this report is really concerned about creating greater opportunity for those 35% of Toronto's residents who live with median household income of under $30,000 in this city. And in order to get there, working with community organizations that work with people with lived experience of living with economic precarity is an important input to this work.
And the part of what I'm moving today includes convening those organizations to ensure that as we build this framework, it is responsive and appropriate from their perspective, and that they have the opportunity to really provide the input that this change timeline allows, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to ask around one of the things that was apparent in the questions from members previously had to do with the alignment of the various strategies that we have underway. Is it accurate to say that we have, from a number of different points of view that are drivers of inclusive economic development, whether it be community benefits, a focus on gender, a focus on confronting anti-Black racism, focus on Indigenous reconciliation in the economy, focus on the pieces that various pieces, including, for example, Transform TO, which is quite a broad and horizontal strategy that we have, that this is an opportunity to speak across these different strategies about how we are going to remove barriers to economic inclusion?
Through you, Chair Councilor Bravo, yes, and that includes more streamlined accountability among divisions who hold pieces of this work, as well as this committee's been clear about wanting clearer metrics to know what we achieve when. And so those are parts of the work.
Thank you very much. And are there any other questions of staff? Now to speakers. Any speakers, Vice Chair Carroll and Councillor Fletcher?
Yeah, it's been an interesting path from when this report came forward to now. We're narrowing it down, and I don't think we should. I don't think we should let ourselves get frustrated by the fact that we're now going to move it to November, because it's such a big piece. It really does have to. It really does have to be felt across the broad thing known as economic development. And that's hard to do. The risk was always that it become narrowed down into just this thing that we think about if we're doing a community benefit plan. And in fact, it should be a mindset, so that it seeps into everywhere, all the way up to Toronto Global. Thanks for coming to town, but what are you going to do once you get here? It should be even in our foreign direct investment strategy in some way, shape, or form as a mindset. And so the fact that we're getting down to metrics, I think that is a key piece. And even I say this is budget cheap, even if it costs us a few cents to figure out that for the framework, it's going to be really important going forward, so that we can actually, say, oh, there was a missed opportunity. An opportunity for something came to town in which 2,500 people will be used. But we didn't actually have the conversation about how are you going to access Torontonians for the local hires. And we've done that very well in some sectors, and then others just sort of go their own way, and we're not really measuring. And so I think it's worth taking the time. I really appreciate the chair's motion, so we get that right, and we make that statement in the economic action plan that they're wedded, that there's the broad plan, but it very much has to be wedded to this. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher to speak.
No, I just appreciate the time and attention that you, Chair and Vice Chair, are putting into this really important initiative, and not just, okay, here's our economic plan, that our economic plan has to not just be about attracting business, it has to be about lifting up everybody in the city. And we do have that opportunity. It's adding a different lens, and I know it's taking a bit more time, but I'm now looking at that beautiful fan that Denise actually can't take my eyes off of that. So it's just a really exciting moment to set this stage, because once this has been set, it will be something that will be able to work with and develop over many, many years. And I do, when Councillor Carroll said, you know, we all get the heebie-jeebies when we hear about a framework, because what happens is you have a framework, and then by the time we start to implement it, guess what? We have a new framework. So that's the history of how we do things, or we forgot something, so we have to come back and put it in. So I appreciate the fact we're doing that. I guess I just want to have really clear inputs. And when I asked about parks, and I'll leave that with you, Madam Chair, I don't think we should say, well, we're going to look at that. I actually think that if we need to be analyzing what we have done. So how many what's the local hiring process where we hire thousands of people, and that's PF&R? What's the local hiring process where there's 80,000 tenants, that's TCHC? What's the local hiring process for outreach? And again, tracking some of those things. We don't need to, I hate it when we only talk about the future. Let's look at what we've done. Maybe it wasn't great, that gives us a good picture, and where maybe some places are working really well. So there's a benchmark for everybody else. If we don't do that, then we're all starting at zero. And if we say that we have to start at zero and finding things out now, I think that's a very weak position. We should be here with that type of information already. How many community benefits agreements have we had? How many new jobs is that? And I know Mr. Andrea Campbell was here when we got the first report on Regent Park and the number of jobs. TCHC hadn't been tracking, actually. We had to go in, and there were, even the report, it was a staff report from our staff that were counting CPR, 320 people having received CPR training somehow as a community benefit from the Regent Park redevelopment. I think we need to say, put a level at what is a community benefit and what's just something that you would do in any community where everybody would get certain kinds of training. So let's get this right. Let's have a great framework, but let's also populate that framework with information that we already have. So it's not like we're starting, if you think we're starting at zero, then I think we have a different problem. We're not starting at zero. We're trying to take what we've done, check what it is, see where it's worked, see where we're lacking, work from data, not from our future. I think data is very important, and get this really robust. And I don't think anybody needs to wait till November to initiate some of these things, Madam Chair. And that's why I brought forward the firefighting in TCHC, because one of the things is our firefighters. It's a big hire. We don't have to wait to get those instructions. We can just start any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers, other speakers? I will speak, and I have a motion that the Economic and Community Development Committee refer the item to the General Manager of Economic Development and Culture, Executive Director, Social Development, Finance and Administration, the Executive Director of Employment and Social Services, and the Chief Planner and Executive Director of City Planning, with the request that they report to the November 26, 2024 meeting of the Economic and Community Development Committee with a revised framework that builds on input from community partners. I can't think of anything that's more powerful than the City of Toronto looking at all of the ways that we can remove barriers to people who want and deserve economic inclusion in the city. Right now, we're all aware of the affordability crisis, but I think that the inequality crisis is really what compounds this. We have many people in the city who simply are not able to live a good life and have a livelihood that will allow for that. And so we have a responsibility to use every tool that we have available to us to make sure that we're getting out of the way of people who simply want to just raise a family, live a good life, and we have a lot to build upon. I think of 6 things that the city does. Hiring, so workforce is really important, as we've heard. What we buy, procurement is crucial, and looking at this as an opportunity. The contracting of services, we enable through licensing and other means, something that we hadn't really considered, I think, up to now, and perhaps that's a future piece of work. Land use planning is absolutely essential. And participation. Community economic development and community development require that the people that we are trying to lift up or get out of the way of, define the problem, look for solutions or support them, and then are able to sit alongside decision makers to monitor progress. And this opportunity of a longer consideration of the framework will create that opportunity. I think working with staff to convene the organizations and the people that are doing this work alongside many divisions at present. This isn't new. This is just lifting it up and making it coherent and horizontal in the best way possible. I want to speak to the idea of baselines. I think it is important to do the inventory of what we're doing already, and that will develop baselines, and then we will see potentially that there is uneven progress in different parts of the city. From that baseline, I think we can identify really good practices, and those practices can turn into goals. And they can be specific and measurable, achievable, all of the things that have to do, and time-bound. And we have to start with what we have. And then I think another thing that's really important about this approach is that not all of the work that needs to be done is the City of Toronto's to do. Some of it is done in community, some of it is done through private enterprise. I think about the construction industry and others. And some of it has to do with other orders of government. But until we actually identify and define what we mean by inclusive economic development, and we set some goals for ourselves, and that we hold ourselves accountable to achieving those goals, and that we look across all of the work that's being done to provide some integration, strategic integration. In many ways, we're talking about the same people, whether it's we're talking about the same neighborhoods, we're talking about the same communities. So let's wrap our arms around them and make sure that we are delivering change in a way that's meaningful. I look forward to working with staff on the convening. I look forward to seeing what community economic development work is already underway. And as has already been said, that we build on success, and that we, I think, don't see the November report as the end, but the framework for intentionally and specifically, strategically, and with a lot of vigor, moving ahead on making sure that everything we do at the City of Toronto creates economic opportunity for the people that have had the least access to it. Are there any other speakers? Okay, on the item, on the motion? In favor? Opposed? That's carried. And that is adopted. We're going to go on to EC 14.7, targeted expansion of the Association of Community Centers to support community development in Toronto. Deputy Mayor Malik, are you ready for that, or do we want to hold it down further?
Yeah,
Are we ready, or do we want to hold it down?
which one? For
AOX.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't,
I think you can do that. Wait.
why don't we continue to hold this down, and then we'll go on to 14.8 Downtown East Action Plan, Implementation Update, and 2025 to 2030 Action Plan. And we have speakers on that item. The first speaker is Walid Kogali. Are you here? Is Walid Kogali online? Walid Kogali going 3 times. And that is the speaker. So we're going to move on to the item. Are there any questions of?
He is online.
Okay, Walid Kogali is online. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Bravo, and members of the Economic and Community Development Committee. So my name is Walid Kogali Ali, and I'm deputing on behalf of Neighborhood Pods TO, a collective of grassroots organizations, community workers, and advocates committed to securing affordable housing and promoting responsible development in our communities. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today regarding the Downtown East Action Plan implementation update and the 2025 to 2030 Action Plan. I wish to express our strong support for the letter sent by the Moss Park Coalition and highlight the importance of strategic investments in community development initiatives like the Social Development Plan in Regent Park. The Moss Park Coalition was formed in 2021 to advocate for community benefit agreements as part of the Ontario Line project and to help identify and amplify community priorities amidst the significant development pressures facing the Moss Park neighborhood. We have been closely following the development of the Downtown East Action Plan and deeply appreciate the hard work of the Economic and Community Development Committee and city staff in creating this updated plan. While the new plan addresses many challenges in the Downtown East, we're particularly interested in initiatives like the Dundas-Sherbourne Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. This initiative directly addresses some of the underlying causes of issues experienced by many in Moss Park. Additionally, we're encouraged to hear that the potential redevelopment of Toronto community housing properties in Moss Park would be guided by a community development plan. It's essential that local residents and community members' needs and wishes are central to the redevelopment process. One of the significant challenges facing the Moss Park community is the lack of formal neighborhood organizations, such as a residents association. This absence creates barriers that prevent local residents from influencing development in the neighborhood. In response to this, it's important for us to be launching initiatives that empower residents. So the Moss Park Coalition will soon be launching the Empower Moss Park campaign to provide a platform for local residents to work together to form a common vision for the future of their neighborhood. We aim to co-develop a list of development priorities and strategies with local residents and stakeholders to inform future public and private developments in the area. The Moss Park Coalition also will be launching this project in July at the Moss Park Summer Festival, and we hope that members of council will join us to share our results with the city. Furthermore, we would like the city to consider bringing the Community Benefits Office into early conversations about the Dundas-Sherbourne Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. This will help ensure that we maximize the employment and procurement opportunities available to local Moss Park residents and businesses and allow for the true co-development of this important project. A community benefits agreement will also signal to the Moss Park community that they will be long-term partners in the life of the project, not merely participants in brief consultations or info sessions. In addition, we want to emphasize the importance of investments like the Social Development Plan in Regent Park. Such investments have been crucial in fostering resident leadership, forming a neighborhood association, establishing a community governance table. These initiatives have been pivotal in addressing key priorities related to community building, employment and economic development, safety, communications, and supports for vulnerable community members, particularly youth and seniors. Moreover, we stress the importance of working closely with provincial agencies such as Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario to implement community benefits and rent geared to income housing in Moss Park. By collaborating with these agencies, we can ensure that the development projects not only provide affordable housing options, but also incorporate community benefits that promote long-term social and economic sustainability. By supporting initiatives like the Social Development Plan, we create pathways for resident engagement and leadership, ensuring that the voices of those most affected by developments are heard and prioritized. This approach has
Please
proven
wrap up.
effective in
You're over
Pigeon Park,
time.
and can serve as a model for Moss Park and other communities undergoing significant development. In conclusion, we're pleased to see the updates to the Downtown East Action Plan, highlighting the Moss Park neighborhood, and we look forward to seeing this plan put into action.
Okay, you're going to have
Thank
to
you.
stop there. Thank you. I have a question for you. You referenced a community benefits agreement, and I guess I'm confused about what you mean by that, given that if a social development plan is already a way for community participation in decision-making through a formal process in relationship with the city, while a community benefits agreement, as the definition that I understand, involves a community-based organization negotiating with a private developer or an agency that's undergoing a specific project that involves infrastructure or other forms of development to make gains that can be in the range of workforce or others. And so I'm confused about why there would be a community benefits agreement in this situation.
Excellent question, Councillor Bravo. Well, we know that both Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario will be making investments across the Ontario line. There's a Moss Park subway station that's going to be developed. Metrolinx has 4 community benefit pillars, and what we're hoping to do is work with Metrolinx as well as Infrastructure Ontario to make sure that those investments are very intentional with hard targets that could be summarized in a community benefits agreement. So we want to use the community benefits agreement as a tool for enforcement, but also for priority setting when it comes to resident needs in Moss Park, which is part of the Ontario line.
Okay,
And it should be included, and we hope that it will be included in the Downtown East Action Plan in future iterations.
Okay, so you're going to be negotiating with Metrolinx building on the framework agreement that was adopted in 2014, but in fact, it's not. The social development plan is I think a separate process. So I think that we have to make sure that's clear. Thanks for your deputation. Are there any other questions of the deputant? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? No questions of staff. Are there any speakers? Councillor Moyes.
Thank you, and through Chair Bravo, I do have a motion. And it's just 2 minor amendments. The first one really talks about strengthening accountability, social responsibility, and community connections. And the second piece is really just adding one word, welcoming, safe, welcoming, and inclusive communities. Again, a lot of work has gone into this revised action plan. We had many public consultations with this. We were able to hear from hundreds of people from across the ward to talk about what worked and what didn't work over the last 5 years of the pilot project. And staff has been very attentive, I have to say, and responsive to the questions and concerns that they heard from the community. And I too provided some input, which was also reflected in here. And so I think it's a great document. I think it will really help enhance the Downtown East. As you know, our ward is so diverse. It triples in size every day. People come here to Sankofa Square, to the Pride Festival we just had last past weekend, and so many, the Cabbagetown Festival, so many things are happening in the downtown core. We also know that 62% of social services is also in Toronto Centre. which impacts the ward in a significant way. And again, the Downtown East Action Plan talks about needle pickup, picking up of human excrement and all those things that impact our ward in a significant way every day. So again, I'm really happy to see that all the things that have been discussed by the community is been addressed here. And I just want to thank staff again for all the hard work they put into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Can I just ask?
Question of the mover? Go
Because
ahead.
I know the criticism we often get with the community grants program is that the documents are too detailed and ask for too much accountability on that thing. It takes forever you need an expert to fill them out. Are the things you want to add to the grant documents, are they aligning with the things that are already in there?
They are aligning. Yes, they are. It's in there, but I just wanted it to be stated, specifically around accountability.
Going to be stated here, so if they're looking at it, they've got the heads up. They're going to be, those things will be required.
That's right.
Okay, I see. Okay, thanks. Okay.
To speak or a question of the mover, Councillor Fletcher?
No, I'm just going to speak for a second and say that this downtown, the action plan for Downtown East has long been there, and I really want to commend Councillor Moyes for having carried this forward and picked it up. It's a very difficult situation, continues to be, and requires a lot of resources, including from the city. And often the councillor is the one who's holding all the threads of all of the different divisions of what's going on, what's happening there with public health, with parks, with the parks ambassadors, with encampments. There are a lot of different things that go on. And it does take a lot of effort to bring everybody together. So just advancing this every time and keeping your eye on it, I just want to say I think that's very good for the city. And as a new councillor, you haven't dropped the ball, Downtown East ball, so I think that's great.
Any other speakers? I'll just say that I agree that this is an excellent work from staff, and to thank Councillor Moyes for his leadership on this. And I think that the motion that you've moved is very much in the spirit of the conversation that we had around inclusive economic development. And I think it really does pave the way for expectations of what we mean for benefit for people locally. And I think that it's a great example of, I only wish we could do this work in other parts of the city. Some parts of the city will have envy here. So to vote now on the motion. In favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item as amended. In favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We're going to go back to 14.7. I believe that motions are ready for that. And that is, we're ready to go. So Councillor, Deputy Mayor Malik had held this item. Would you like to, do you have questions of staff?
I don't have questions, but do other folks?
No questions of staff. To speak, Deputy Mayor Malik?
Yes, thank you very much. I was glad to see this this item coming forward. In my community, we do have AOCs, and they serve an incredible purpose in the community to provide services, to bring community together, to provide hubs in our neighborhoods, and for the continued kind of examination of their benefit in neighborhoods in the downtown and right across the city is very exciting. And I have an amendment to move forward to address the issue of geographic distribution in the framework to ensure that AOCs can continue to be an option in every part of the city as this moves forward without limitations.
Of the mover? No, just. Okay, anyone questions? No, to speak, counts Vice Chair Carroll.
I too am happy to see this coming forward. The lack of AOCs in the suburbs is not for lack of trying. Just want you to know that. You know, when we amalgamated, I tried to see the silver lining in things, and this was one of them, but it wasn't to be. Parkway Forest Community Center, we made an attempt that be an AOC. Instead, what we have is some agency spaces over here that Ms. Campbell will remember took a lot of work, but they don't have the same supportive and collaborative atmosphere because they're over here and then recreation is over there. And we didn't go about them in quite the same way. There is a secret sauce to when you are an actual AOC and it becomes that collaboration between the entities sitting inside of a building. We desperately need this in parts of the suburbs. And I think that while we've got, you know, a goal and we have to be careful, they do actually cost the core admin. And so it's got to be targeted. They actually, you know, the capital amounts. I think that a lot of times we are spending money in some suburban communities that we wouldn't be having to spend on things like security and policing and so on and so forth. Because AOCs, putting together those agencies in one place, it really gets at roots. Whereas we're just sort of playing a game of whack-a-mole with various crises in some of the neighborhoods in our community, increasingly the one that I represent. And so while it's targeted, I think we have to monitor and watch it very carefully because this expansion could be a real sea change and it generate the kinds of things if Councillor Myers will allow me, for instance, the collaboration he's looking for between parks and schools, it would probably have happened in AOC organically for a lot less money because there's just this venue that pulls the people together. We literally don't have that unless with great and Herculean effort we set out in a development, and man, oh man, we won't get those years of our lives back, Denise, to set up this little agency space, and it still doesn't quite function the way an AOC does, but we really have to try and see this happening north of Eglinton, north of the 401, very targeted in specific places, because I think the kinds of collaborations that are generated in those buildings are exactly the kind of thing that we're now moving emotions in other ways that maybe aren't the best ways to do them. We have this model that makes that happen organically. So I'm encouraged that instead of hard no, every time we say, can we have another one, there's a way forward here. Because then Parks and Rec can be getting on with what Parks and Rec does best. Those are my comments.
Any other speakers? Councillor Fletcher.
Well, I was very pleased to have brought this motion the first time to say, let's look at expanding a really good model that a number of us have. Unfortunately, Councillor Carroll, you didn't get that. And look at amalgamation. And that was a moment where priority centers could have been expanded across the city, free entry for parks, for recreation, AOCs, and that didn't happen. It didn't happen because bad people in the old city of Toronto. It didn't happen because councillors in the suburbs in general didn't want to expand. So I always have to make that point, particularly around priority centers. But I do really and truly want to say for AOCs in general, where we find them, they are there as a community development model. It's not a community recreation center, although it may contain community recreation, like Eastview does, like Scatting does. I don't know about 519 if they have a gym or anything of that kind. Scatting even has a pool. And so in picking our way forward here, they really are set up. They were set up to work in community, and they were set up to work in low-income communities. And most of them are very strategically located with a, like Scatting at Alex Park, like Eastview at Blake Boltby, Main Street, Center 55 for the Main Street location at Main and Danforth. They're very consciously there. They're not there in order to have a board and now the community can have something. They're there to do exactly what you said, Councillor Carroll. Reduce conflict, reduce crime, bring forward youth, do community development, very clearly focused programs, and able to bring in the Boys and Girls Club. I just want to talk about the importance of the Boys and Girls Clubs. And we don't have those. We can't bring those into a rec center, but they are really a stalwart part of AOCS and can be, because what we're looking at is different pathways for youth and assisting seniors. I'll tell you that Apple Grove, which is at John Somerville, and other TCHC buildings in Queen and Coxwell, during the pandemic, they simply took on outreach to seniors. That was part of their community outreach. So it's a very special model. I'd really like to make sure when this is going on that the criteria for setting it up is clear. These aren't, I'm just going to say they're not wealthy neighborhood models. I'll just put it like that very clearly. And that they're never intended to be that. And also that they're clear on their mandate. I think if through this exercise, we're kind of being clearer to the AOCS. You are here, that's a city building, it's city funded. Yes, you can get money from United Way, you can get money from other things to run programs, but at the end of the day, you're here because there's a mandate for you to work in a certain way in the community. And to understand that and to implement that means that we have a fantastic AOC model. And AOC is such a crazy name because nobody understands it. Association of Community Centers, and we just call them that because there's 10 of them. It is. We know the name, but maybe at some point we need to come up with something different that explains it. And I also think that many of the executive directors and also those executive directors who've retired, there's retirees, they've been there and they can help. The difference between this model, which is a community development model, and a recreation model, and there's nothing wrong with either of them. There's nothing wrong with the recreation model. People need to go and swim and work out and do all those things and go to kids' camps and do all of it, is that the staffing is just a little more secure. In all of the AOCS, the executive directors have been there 10 years, 12 years. The staff have been there for a long time. At Eastview, the staff have been recruited from Blake Boltby, from TCHC, and sit on the board of the AOC. It's a different approach, and not that there's anything wrong with one or the other, but we've basically have a withered arm of the AOCS at the moment, and we need to make this a much more robust model. So I'm very happy with this report, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your amendment to make sure that places like Alex Park, which are having a big redevelopment, could take advantage of this as well, because there's a moment when that can happen, like Lawrence Heights, Alex Park, and baking this in from the beginning could be very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah. I also want to echo the words that have been said around the importance of this work to economic community development outcomes. We're seeing a problem, especially among youth in the city, the effects of the pandemic, the cost of living, the relationships that are built organically and deeply in a community are foundational to community safety and well-being. So I won't repeat the words that were already said so well by Councillor Fletcher, but to also echo thank you to staff and thank you to Deputy Mayor Malik for this motion. Any other speakers? Good. So on the motion, on the amendment, all in favor Opposed, that's carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Opposed, that is also carried. Thank you. We are now going on to 14.9, Toronto Fire Services Career Pathways for Toronto Community Housing Residents, held by Councillor Fletcher. Questions of staff?
I don't know who's here from fire.
They're back there.
Oh, I hate it when everybody, my back is to everybody. Okay, over there, our great team. I just wanted, in bringing this forward and trying to establish this recruitment process through TCHC and making sure that youth or whoever, middle-agers, whoever's going to be applying, have that opportunity. I just wanted to ask questions because generally we do it through Ontario Works and through tests. And I think you've heard me say before, it's very limiting. How are we going to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, including people that aren't on OW, but people that are working 2, maybe 3 part-time jobs and that also have a chance to be part of this? Because I would have to suggest if we can't do that, then we're missing out. So what's the plan for that, please?
Madam Chair.
Hard question.
Madam Chair, I'll start and then perhaps over to my colleagues in both TESS and TCH. So this is a really exciting program and I appreciate the opportunity to have been a part of this. We're working, of course, in close collaboration with Mr. Barrett and the TCHC team. And from our perspective, this is a program that creates additional focused opportunities for TCH residents. It prioritizes those residents and provides the framework and from the outset for a pathway to success for the entry point into careers in the Toronto Fire Service. So from our perspective, all of that has been laid out. There is some future, some inclusion in order to see this implemented that of course goes outside the fire service portfolio, and I'll look to Mr. Baird that requires some funding amendment within the TCH envelope. So over to you, sir.
Thanks very much, and through the chair, yeah, happy to speak to this item as well. We regularly work with Ontario Works and with TESS around employment opportunities for TCHC tenants. But as you've pointed out, there are not as many opportunities for those who are not on Ontario Works. And so what is laid out in the proposal essentially is that we would have to make an additional investment to do that we would have to be looking to target additional tenants outside of the standard OW cohorts that we're already aware of. Identify those tenants and then help with skill building and help with cohorting them into certification and training programs to make ready for employment opportunities like at Toronto Fire Service. If successful, that could potentially be expanded to other employment opportunities as well. But it does require an additional investment to make that program work.
And are you expecting that as a TCHC investment or a city investment or as a Toronto Fire investment?
Through the chair, the conversations we've had so far is that would be subject to a 2025 budget conversation. But we've laid out what it would take for TCHC, for example, to make those investments, but happy to look at what's the most appropriate vehicle to bring that forward.
So that's through the budget. I don't want to put Ms. Andrea Campbell on the spot here because she's filling in today. But, and this plan will be, we're waiting for 2025 to start, or can we not start faster than that?
Yeah, through the chair, we can. So actually what we've done is we've identified both a short-term and a long-term approach. And in the short term, what we can do is we can make some funds available that we've already got to provide bursary type support for identified tenants. So we think we could potentially do 4 of those late this year or early next year with existing funding. And that would help folks access the kinds of training that would be necessary to be ready to move into a fire employment opportunity, for example. The expanded program that I spoke to earlier, where you look to create a large cohort, we're targeting perhaps 90 tenants to begin with, and then sort of whittling that down to a smaller group that could go through certification and training programs, for example, perhaps 20 is what we've targeted. That's what would require the larger budget investment that we're looking to do next year. But we can start with bursaries late this year, early next year.
Yes, and are there scholarships that are out there through United Way, through anything else for Toronto Community Housing for residents to be able to apply or access funds for training?
So through the chair, I believe there are. I don't have that information at my fingertips, but happy to report back on that.
So just to be clear, this could start as early as the fall or next year. You're looking for interested parties, and you're looking for a funding source in order to make sure that this program is open to folks who are just working their butts off at the moment on a number of small jobs, not just folks that are looking for work through OW, correct?
That's correct. I just want to be careful, though, because the short-term approach, where we could provide a few bursaries, the magic is sort of in the matching and how you find the right people to take those kinds of opportunities. And so it's a good opportunity to move forward with that, but the broader approach of really targeting a larger group and finding the perfect matches will be far more successful.
Yes, I just want to ask Fire one question, because I think I'm the, just in your budget, I mean, you do have a recruitment budget, and you do, I don't know if you have a training budget, but it's also something that obviously Toronto Fire is interested in and should be interested in, because it is diversifying your workforce. So what kind of financial commitment would you need to have in order to assist in this type of training, Chief?
Madam Chair, a couple of things, Councillor. So first off, we have already tooled up and have already deployed resources from recruitment and community outreach. They're working literally now in partnership with TCH, so that's already happening. We do have a training budget. Our training budget is focused on internal staff training, not external. And the challenge for us, which is what's been contemplated in this program, hence the partnership with TCH, we have to maintain an arm's length relationship as we are the agency who has delegated authority to certify firefighters once they're trained. So there has to be that 1 degree of separation from us, hence the partnership with TCH, because it satisfies all of those legal requirements.
So that's an extra 2 minutes.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you. That's money in the bank.
And Councillor Carroll just said, who is answering those questions? And I know before I have introduced our new CEO, Sean Baird, but you should meet her. She's the budget chief, Sean.
Yeah, a meet and greet.
A meet and greet.
Yeah, thank you.
Get that set up. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. Just in case others don't know who you are, I think it's always good to welcome you here because you're still fairly new. Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. Are there any other questions of staff to speak? Are there any speakers on this item? Going once, going twice, speakers?
No, I think I don't need to speak. I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's really important. Again, what we talked about earlier, inclusive economic development, and we talked Ms. Madigan-Lee and trying to find a way to determine how we're doing in the city as far as recruitment is concerned of diverse groups and equity hiring. And here is a perfect plan that at the end of the day, we'll have 15 new folks that are well-trained, and maybe from the 90, there'll be people that find their way into other kinds of jobs. So it's all about lifting people up and assisting them, and that's what we like to do here. So this is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I just also want to say that this is such an important good news item to come to this committee on the day that we're talking about inclusive economic development, that we're talking about social development plans for neighborhoods, that the community development approach that's being taken at Toronto Community Housing is excellent news for the City of Toronto, that there's, as we've said before, tremendous savings to be had in enforcement when we actually create pathways for people to have a good job. And this is a good union job. It's a career-making job. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, for being an excellent matchmaker here. And I know you've a long time board member of Toronto Community Housing, and you know the the work that's been done very, very well, so thank you for that. And I want to speak to the question of baseline development that we discussed before. These are the kinds of successes that create a new baseline, and when we report on this, we can challenge each other across divisions and across agencies, boards, and commissions to lift up the good practices that are proven, and this is one of them. Any other speakers? On the item, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Fantastic. We are going back to, we're going to 1412, and before we break, we'll be adding a couple of items to the agenda once we're ready. 1412 is Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Implementation Roundtable update. We have many speakers, and you're most welcome to be here. I'm going to be calling people's names, and I will let you know when you're next so that you can get queued up, because we're going to be here for a while, and we want to make sure that we're very efficient so we can get through the agenda. The first speaker is Yanida Polanco. Online? Oh. Is Yanida Polanco online right now? Okay. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Thanks.
Great. Good morning, Nana Bojo. Greetings in the Ojibwe language. My name is Yanira Polanco. I'm an early childhood educator. I have worked in the childcare field for over 30 years, and I have raised my own children in childcare while working in childcare. My children were nurtured and cared for some of the most remarkable educators in the field of early childhood education. My youngest is now 19, was diagnosed with congenital heart disease at birth and multiple medical and developmental disabilities. And while the school system pushed him off to isolation, his childcare educators supported him to see him grow and thrive. They believed in him, they nurtured him, they cared for him, providing an inclusive and rich environment. Today, all my children sit at the dinner table and reminisce of those years that made an impact on who they are as individuals. They don't forget, I don't forget. We are indebted, and I know the value of childcare. We have a childcare crisis. Still in the current state of early childhood education, we have passionate early childhood educators nurturing our young generation. I also see every day in my work educators who are exhausted by all the demands and imposition we have placed on them without proper support and proper funding. We have classrooms where child-adult ratios are high as early as 7:30 in the morning, and those ratios don't drop until after 5 p.m. And those are ratios above the legislative requirement. This forces our educators to work overtime most of the time. We have classrooms where up to 5 out of 10 children in the room have multiple diagnoses, most of them in the autism spectrum and other exceptionalities. And most always, the work is done without any additional support funding. We are failing these children. Our educators do the best they can to nurture, to care, to provide, to develop curriculum plans, and to meet the needs of the children in their care. We have a childcare crisis in our hands. Our children deserve better. Our children deserve increased funding to support additional team members to cover these ratios. Our children deserve to be cared by educators that are not at the brink of burnout because of the extended hours of work and the lack of resources. Low wages that forces them to get second jobs so that they can support their financial needs. We are failing our children. Our most vulnerable population, our children, deserve to be cared by educators who are not in vulnerable and precarious positions themselves. This is a vicious cycle. Poor funding, poor workforce, poor pay, decreased quality, and the ones impacted are the most vulnerable ones, our children. Let's make early childhood education a priority. We need to have proper funding formula that covers the true cost of childcare, funding that supports additional educational resources, funding that supports services for children with special needs, funding that supports improved ratios and wages. This is a critical situation we find ourselves in, and we cannot wait any longer. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, we are going next to Christine Chea, followed by Caroline LaRocque. Is Christine Chea online? No? Yep. Okay. Christine Chea?
Yep, that's me.
Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christine Chia, and I have a 2.5-year-old with Learning Enrichment.
I'm sorry, I'm going to pause your time. We can't hear you. Can you check your sound?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Please continue.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. My name is Christine Chia, and I have a 2.5-year-old at the Learning Enrichment Foundation daycare run out of Carlton Village in your riding, Councillor Bravo. On June 27, 2024, parents of children enrolled in LEF, a participant in the Canada-wide Early Learning Child Care Program, received word that daycare staff wages will be reduced and role changes necessary in order to sustain childcare operations due to restrictions of the funding formula in the CWE-LCC program. This isn't unique to LEF, but this is a story that resonates across daycares across Ontario. The need to resort to wage decreases is absurd and something that I cannot believe has to be considered in order to keep a daycare running. Parents with children enrolled in LEF in very short order banded together, and we have a group of about 100 parents who are just as equally as concerned as I am. Every single day since my son started daycare almost 1.5 years ago, I think to myself that the early child care workforce is not paid nearly enough. The ECEs are almost like family to my son. Given the value and benefit that they are providing to our children, to the general workforce, and to the economy, they are invaluable. And now to learn that my son's daycare needs to resort to wage cuts is absolutely unbelievable. The writing is on the wall. If something is not done to help bridge the gap immediately, I think there will be a noticeable degradation in the quality of childcare across the city and the rest of Ontario, in both the short and long term. The limited pool of ECEs will seek employment elsewhere, and future generations will opt not to consider becoming early child care educators, creating further talent pool scarcities in the sector. The CWE-LCC guidelines state that licensees may be subject to cost escalations that are beyond the control of the licensee, for example, rent increases, and this may impact their capacity to participate in CWE-LCC. As such, consolidated service managers and district social services admin boards, such as Toronto Children's Services, will provide additional funding to all enrolled licensees to support increasing costs beyond the revenue replacement. The guidelines further go on to say that the ministry is continuing to review revenue replacement and that funding should be provided by the service managers and social services. This prescriptive formula, using inflation of about 4%, is not enough to keep up with the cost increases that these daycares are facing. This formula needs to be revisited so that it truly recognizes the actual costs of operating a daycare. Is this little funding that is being promised through this program even coming through to daycares? The guidelines go on to say that service managers and social services must provide eligible daycares with funding to support annual wage increases for eligible ECE staff earning less than the wage eligibility ceiling for that year. Is this even happening? Now, if this were any other operating business, fees would increase to help offset any increases to the operating budget. The daycares can't do this as their commitment to CWE-LCC holds them to keep their rates frozen to March 2022 rates. Not only has significant inflation occurred since then, but there are many instances where daycares actually voluntarily froze their fees during the pandemic or were keeping their rates as low as they could to keep fees to parents low. Admirable and fine for the short term, but not sustainable in the long term. Understandably, a lot of the questions and items that I've raised are out of the city's control. However, I believe that there are efforts and creative solutions that the city's various governing bodies can come together to provide relief to the daycares across the city. Can there be relief on municipally granted permits or fees that the daycare must pay? For daycares that operate out of the TDSB properties, can a partnership be established that would result in rent relief? While I appreciate the efforts of this roundtable and its findings, I don't think enough has been done, and I don't think the city is moving fast enough to come up with a stopgap solution. Early childcare is being threatened, centers are running deficits, and some are shutting down, while others, like my son's daycare, are proposing wage cuts. And roundtable discussions with no clear objectives or timelines aren't going to help. The City of Toronto must do more to pressure the provincial government to ensure that the general intent and objective of the CWELCC is met. The city must do more to ensure that our children are not used as pawns in a political battle over political wins. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and for speaking to, from Carleton Village and Davenport, the problems with the provincial funding formula and the wildly outdated rates. Really appreciate that. And the next speaker is Caroline Larocque, who's online. Caroline Larocque will be followed by Nicola McGuire. Caroline, welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Caroline Larocque, and I live in the Toronto St. Paul's community. I'm also a parent of 2 children who access daycare services in the city of Toronto. So I have a 5-year-old daughter and an 18-month-old son. They both access care from 2 daycare centers, so Humewood Daycare Center and Vaughan Road Child Care Center, both part of St. Paul's, which are Learning Enrichment Foundation daycare spaces. My daughter attended Vaughan Road Daycare as an infant in 2020. She attended the center her whole daycare experience before she began junior kindergarten. So she started in the infant room, she moved to the toddler space, to the preschool room, spending more than 3 years of her life with the educators and staff there. Since starting junior kindergarten this past September, she's also enrolled in an aftercare daycare space, which is also part of LEF. And that's attached to the Humewood Community School, which is her JK school. When I was pregnant with my second child, we knew that we wanted to get him into the same center that my daughter attended when I was ready to go back to work. He's now been there for 6 months, and just this week actually transitioned to the toddler room, which has been very exciting for us, very seamless, very easy. It's not an accident that both of our children have attended LEF daycare spaces. It is entirely due to the dedication of the staff and educators that work there. My daughter is confident, socially skilled, warm, inquisitive, curious, a super duper kid, in no small part due to her experiences at daycare. The staff there taught her how to eat, how to hold spoons and forks, how to put on her coat and her shoes, how to use the toilet, how to do creative and artistic things, use her body for active movement, and moreover, how to share, how to be kind, and how to say you're sorry. My son had feeding challenges from birth, from the minute he was born up until about 12 or 15 months of age. And the educators at his center were endlessly patient, encouraging, and helpful as we helped him navigate learning that really important skill and developmental skill. I can't count the amount of times I've had phone conversations, in-person conversations, where we've made really small changes to how we're feeding him to help him grow and develop in that area. Something that was stressful and overwhelming and that I didn't experience with my first child was made much less distressing because of the care and the patience and the knowledge that the educators had. And it made it much less easier for me and for my partner to navigate. The work of an early childhood educator is hard. It's physically and emotionally demanding and requires specialized training. I'm lucky in my job because I work as a faculty member and counselor at Seneca Polytechnic. I've been doing this for 8 years. I have personally supported students who are enrolled in the ECE college program. I see firsthand how challenging and demanding their training is. They learn about child development, pedagogies of learning, educational programming, working with families and communities. In my opinion, the ECE profession has always been underpaid and undervalued. Daycare operators and educators shape our kids into good people and good citizens. They give the very most valuable things in our life, which is our children. They have them for the better part of a day, and they become extensions of our family. Without the CWELCC funding, my own family's fees would have been over $2,200 each month for the last 6 months. And instead, we have paid just under $1,100. Having daycare fees go down has always been something I was hoping for, given that we're renters and living in the city and raising a family is very expensive. However, when we heard this week that the wages would need to be cut, I was devastated. Many families can't afford to pay even with the current reduced rates. So asking hardworking educators to earn less money for their labor and care is unacceptable. It's further unacceptable within the context of the rising cost of living in Toronto, and when we acknowledge that many early childhood educators are women and racialized women. There's no version of this funding model in which our operators should be forced to pay educators less just to keep their doors open. The stakeholders who understand this issue the most are parents and daycare operators. I know LEF employees are going to be speaking coming up and sharing what a more equitable and sustainable funding model looks like. As a parent and supporter of educators, I implore you to heed their call for urgent support. This issue is on fire. We cannot wait a year for this to be fixed. Our educators deserve a funding model that pays livable wages for their invaluable work. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, we're going to go to the next deputant, Nicola McGuire. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Is that on? Yes. Good morning to committee members and attendees. My name is Nicola McGuire. I am the Director of Research and Pedagogical Leadership at the Learning Enrichment Foundation. I had originally planned to share some research we've done in our childcare centers in partnership with Family Cycle Lab at the University of Waterloo. Instead, I'm going to keep it brief. I know there are many people who want to speak today. I did submit a research brief to council, so please be sure to take some time to review our findings. In particular, the impact of longer-term relationships between children and their educators. I'd like to start by saying I'm deeply humbled and grateful to all the families from the Learning Enrichment Foundation who are speaking today, who have submitted emails, and who are joining LEF to advocate on behalf of the educators and the childcare sector. It speaks volumes about the incredible relationships that exist in our programs. At LEF, we take great pride in the relationships we build. With our employees and our families, and also with our community partners, including those at Toronto Children's Services. We are so grateful to the work that TCS has been doing and the challenges that they have faced in managing and distributing CWELC funds. We believe they should be driving this advocacy and using their power to demand a funding formula from the province. Today, I'm simply asking that you embolden them in this work. We need funding to cover the costs of providing quality childcare programs, the true costs. We need funding allocations to ensure that CWELC can be a successful system that not only benefits families and children, but also ensures the early childhood professionals who care for and learn with children each day are paid a wage that reflects the important work that they do and the social, economic, and community contributions they make to the City of Toronto. I'd also like to extend a personal invitation to you, Councillor Bravo, to come up to our Carleton Village location that is in your riding.
At the end of your deputation, thanks very much. I'm very familiar with that site. I was ward council chair for many years in Davenport, and my children participated in Learning Enrichment Foundation programs, and I've been a strong advocate for this sector. My very first deputation around childcare was in the year maybe 2002, 2001 in this committee room, so I'm familiar and I appreciate the work that you do. I do have a question around the pressures that you're experiencing, and just to make sure that deputants understand we've got the municipal responsibility is to be the system operator, the provincial responsibility to fund childcare, and we have this Canada-wide early learning and childcare program, which is a federal program. Are you asking for the City of Toronto to demonstrate what advocacy it's doing at this time with respect to the the flawed provincial funding formula and the just completely out-of-date rates that are being paid?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here, and please know that, you know, this committee values childcare tremendously, so appreciate your presence here. The next speaker is Hava Goldberg. Hava is online. Welcome to committee. Hava Goldberg, are you on?
Yes, hello.
Welcome, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Hava Goldberg. Although I did not move to Toronto until I was in my 20s, I'm proud to consider myself a Torontonian. I love the vibrancy of this city and the endless opportunities it offers. My husband and I deliberately chose to make our lives in this city and raise our family here. We live in the West End, in Councillor Bravo's ward, in an area of the city where there are many families with young children. When our first child turned 1, shortly after the CWE-LCC was implemented, we considered ourselves incredibly fortunate when we were able to get a spot in a daycare within walking distance from our home that was participating in the program. The LEF staff have provided us with loving and supportive care for our child for over 2 years. One of the reasons our child has felt so happy and cared for is because his ECEs have stayed quite consistent during his time at LEF. Last week, the Learning Enrichment Foundation informed us that they will have to take extreme measures, such as cutting wages, as a result of the inadequate funding from the Canada-wide Early Learning and Child Care Program. We are heartbroken, both for the Learning Enrichment Foundation, an incredible nonprofit that should not have been forced to make a decision like this one, and of course for the ECEs, who do a job that is so pivotal to our society, yet so undervalued. We are concerned that the ECEs will no longer be able to afford to work for LEF given this news. Yes, my family has appreciated the reduced childcare fees, but this means nothing without early childhood professionals who deliver these programs for our children. The childcare sector is in crisis, and this crisis is directly connected to the inadequate funding that would ensure equitable wages for all early childhood professionals. I'm calling on the city to, number 1, provide adequate operating funding to bring wages and benefits for all childcare staff up to the City of Toronto wage schedule and cover the actual cost of rent, occupancy, food, and other program costs for 2024 and beyond. 2, provide major capital funding that reflects actual construction costs to expand nonprofit and public childcare in underserved areas and build the 3,100 promised spots in Toronto schools. Number 3, introduce a new provincial funding formula for adequate sustained funding that recognizes actual operating costs of childcare in Toronto. And I recognize you would be advocating for this to the province, as it's not your responsibility. And to support increasing fee subsidies to help lower income families access childcare. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Well, thanks again for speaking from the Carleton Village community and for being here from Davenport. This advocacy is really crucial as we look to the province in particular to fund this childcare appropriately. The next speaker is Ken Solotar. Ken is online. Welcome, Ken Zolotar. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Toronto Economic and Community Development Committee for bringing this issue forward. I'm Ken Zolotar. I'm the father of 2 children who have benefited immensely from participating in childcare programs in Toronto. I encourage you to meet the 4 recommendations outlined by the Learning Education Foundation. I believe that these recommendations will have a profound impact on the economy, childcare center staff, and for our family personally. First, the economy. In March 2023, Toronto Children's Services released the Early Years and Childcare Workforce Project Report. The report notes a thriving childcare and early years workforce is essential for delivering high-quality early childhood programs, which in turn are fundamental for achieving better socioeconomic outcomes, increasing women's labor force participation, and supporting economic growth. The Association of Early Childhood Educators in Ontario recently released the Roadmap to Universal Childcare in Toronto report, which states, The current revenue replacement model, which was intended as a temporary measure 2 years ago, is driving centers into deficit. In September 2025, close to 90% of all program revenues will come from the funding formula. So if the formula isn't right, childcare providers will not be able to continue operations. Second, for the centers and their staff. Childcare operators are being forced to manage their deficits by reducing staff wages, which were already precarious. The Toronto Children's Services report noted that 70% of respondents identified pay as the most significant challenge, and that wages are not sufficient to meet the cost of living in Toronto. 49% indicated contemplating a career change within 1 year. Operators highlighted that ongoing low wages make it very difficult to recruit and retain qualified staff. So, if there are limited staff at the center, ratios are not maintained, and children are turned away at the door. Their parents, the nurses, transit operators, emergency service staff, pharmacists, all have to stay home too. In this scenario, the economy grinds to a halt and social services are further compromised. Now, personally for my family, my 2-year-old currently attends a Learning Enrichment Foundation program at Fairbank Memorial School. The educators love the kids and are doing an amazing job, but it is long hours and a physically and emotional demanding job. We need a better funding strategy to entice educators to stay in these roles. Having long-term teachers is critical for forming attachment and security, and in our case, to provide emergency medical support. My daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy and is at risk of having a seizure at any moment. If her seizure lasts more than 5 minutes, she needs to receive life-saving medication. The staff have been amazing in wanting to learn and participating in regular training that we provide them. But if there are constantly new staff coming in who don't know her history, they may not know how to recognize her seizures or how to administer her medication and seek help. The educators at childcare are like a second family. They comfort our children, prepare and serve their meals, stimulate their brains, teach them to cooperate through play, and provide first aid. Sometimes even life-saving first aid. Reducing staff wages will exacerbate retention challenges. Affordable childcare cannot come at the cost of making the lives of our childcare educators more difficult. A new funding model that provides adequate and sustained funding for staff and centers is essential. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Thank you for being here. The next deputant is Barbara Silva online, and followed by Donna Spreitzer. Welcome to committee, Barbara Silva. You have 5 minutes.
Hello?
Welcome.
Hello?
Yes, welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I was going to say a lot of things that have already been said here of the importance of the ECEs and how deeply concerned I am about the cuts to the salaries of the people that provide childcare for my one child. I am a 45-year-old woman. I have a 1-year-old boy. It took me this much time to be economically stable in my life, especially as an immigrant, to be able to afford to have a family. It's just to get a spot in childcare as is so hard. It's like winning a lottery. I still can't believe I found a spot for him. I still can't believe I can leave him there and come back. I work from home. I can come back and pick him up at the end of the day. I leave him there at 7:30 to 8 a.m. and I pick him up at 5:30. This is a long period of time that I have to trust the care of my child to these people that have. I'm sorry, I prepare a lot, but I'm not gonna read what I prepared because everybody talked about it. But these people are super important. The fact that that they might not be able to keep living in Toronto. I have friends that are moving away from the city because the costs are immense. So I'm very, very concerned for them. I'm very concerned for me because I can see my childcare closing the doors. I can see we're having less and less spots, and then I'll have to be in charge of my kid. I try to work and have a kid at home at the same time, and it's basically impossible. He tries to kill himself every 5 minutes, and I have to prevent that. And I don't know how they do it there, how they keep him alive for so long. So I just want the city to be pressuring the provincial government for these for the funding that is coming from the federal government to trickle down and to come to our schools, to come to our daycares. And I want to know, where is the accountability? How can we see what's the money? Where is this money and where is going? You know, it basically disappears in the air. I really don't know. I'm completely ignorant. I'm trying to figure this out. How come the province receives 17% more in a year and then passes 2% to Toronto? I don't understand this. So I just want to add my voice, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, we have Donna Spreitzer. Is Donna, I don't see Donna yet. Oh, Donna's online. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hear me?
Yeah, welcome to committee. Donna, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Bravo, and a hello to my own representative, Councillor Paula Fletcher. I'm pleased to be able to speak to you today. My name is Donna Spreitzer. I'm the Executive Director at the Toronto Community for Better Childcare, an organization supporting nonprofit and public childcare centers in Toronto. I want to reiterate that the provincial CWELC funding formula is terribly insufficient and is wreaking havoc on the childcare sector. There just is not enough money to cover the true costs. We've known this since this faulty funding formula was introduced in 2022. Not only are we seeing ECEs not being paid a living wage, but we are now hearing from a large nonprofit operator that they are cutting ECE wages to balance the books. This is unacceptable. But we know every single childcare center in Toronto is experiencing a deficit right now and having to make hard decisions and cut expenses. But with staffing over 80% of a budget, the only solution is the revenue side. We need more funding now. For too long, ECEs and supervisors have borne the brunt of making childcare affordable for families. Historically, wages could only be increased by increasing parent fees. It was an annual balancing act. Now, with the promise of the government funding the childcare system, we are finally able to provide parents with reduced fees. And yet, our valuable workforce, the people who care for the children and are the backbone of the sector, are once again being told they must work for less. Back in the fall, this committee and City Council approved several motions for the city to advocate for the childcare sector. The Roundtable was a great start, but we need the city to do more. Toronto has a loud voice, and we call upon city to use its outside voice to pressure the provincial government to immediately add more funding and stop the bloodletting in the childcare sector. We cannot do this without the city's support and help. It cannot be left up to advocates to solve this systemic problem. I also urge the city to follow up on the motions you already approved half a year ago. Number one, the council requests the federal and provincial governments to provide capital and operating funding to reflect the regional and actual costs of developing and operating childcare spaces in Toronto. Provide capital expansion funding required to meet CWELC targets, and provide operating funding that meets the sector's needs in Toronto. Number two, City Council requests the Province of Ontario to develop a workforce strategy for the childcare sector that includes an investment to increase wages and benefits to levels that achieve parity with positions in the public sector in Toronto. Number three, City Council call on the province and the Government of Canada to include the City of Toronto and other large municipalities in discussions that are underway to renew the Canada-Ontario Action Plans. These 3 motions were already approved. Now we need some action. What is stopping the city from creating a Toronto wage grid that reflects parity with public sector employees? What is stopping the city from pressuring the province to do more to save the sector? Finally, the Toronto Community for Better Childcare recommends the City of Toronto to 1, make childcare a priority in its intergovernmental advocacy, and number 2, call on the federal and provincial governments to provide startup, capital, and operating funding to reflect the actual costs of childcare in Toronto and to meet the provincial CWELC expansion targets in the not-for-profit and public sectors in Toronto. Childcare is worth fighting for. Save it, fund it, build it. That is our ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I just thank you for referencing the roundtable, which is the report is what's before us. I just want to just ask you if, when we created the roundtable, one of the objectives was to provide the childcare sector, parents, workers, operators, the academic institutions that certify early childhood educators, the umbrella organizations, the capacity to or support the advocacy. And I appreciate that today is a demonstration of your mobilization. Are you asking for, in a sense, to make more visible the advocacy that the City of Toronto has done at the intergovernmental table going forward? Is that one of the things that you would like to know more explicitly? What is the City of Toronto doing? What is the request at the intergovernmental conversations?
It would be very helpful for the childcare community to know that there is work being done on our behalf. To date, we know that a letter was sent by the 47 large municipalities asking the province not to cut the 85 million administrative budget, which I believe they cut anyway. But we have not heard what's been happening behind the scenes, or if anything is happening behind the scenes. So if there are those conversations happening, we would like to know, because right now the advocates are feeling a bit overwhelmed. We keep hearing there's a new funding formula. Activists are, like my own members, are struggling to just keep their doors open. What we're finding is that it's been very hard to mobilize and get movement because the situation is so dire that our members don't have any bandwidth to really lead a charge of advocacy. We were hoping that the roundtable would be something that we could keep doing, and it may be something that we could call together and do it. But as a small organization, I don't have a meeting place. It's just been hard to know which direction to go. But we did target at that roundtable, Councillor Bravo, that our target was the province. And so we know we need the province to provide more funding, because that seems to be the stopgap of the issue. We know the City of Toronto is doing their best. I know that Shanley McNamee and Children's Services and her team are doing their best. But if there is advocacy happening, can they share that? Can they also share what are some of the funding problems? Like, I know anecdotally from my members that there are hundreds of thousands of expenses that there is no revenue stream for. Hundreds of thousands multiplied by 1,000 childcare centers in the city. My guess is that it's tens of millions of dollars will be the shortfall. It would help us advocate if we knew what the real gap is between what we know the revenue stream to be and what we know the budget expenses are.
Thank you. I appreciate that focused question. I think we've had a number of meetings, not just at the roundtable, We've met together with the mayor, and we are, our office is in contact with your organization and a number of others who are on the deputation list today. But essentially, what you're isolating here is you would like to know what the impact of this implementation is within the Toronto childcare centers, and you're also asking for that information to be provided so that you can more effectively do your advocacy with the province. Is that correct?
That would be very helpful. Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. So thank you very much. And I think in questions from staff, we're going to learn more about what the intergovernmental conversation looks like, the advocacy efforts that are underway, and I look forward to addressing some of your concerns with the motion. I think we'll just go on to the next debutant then. I don't see any other questions. Jenny Kim, and followed by Sultana Jahangir. Jenny Kim is online. Jenny Kim, welcome to committee.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Welcome, yes, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, great, thank you. So my name is Jenny Kim, and I was born and raised and live and work here in this great city. I am a mother of 4 amazing kids. My first daughter is 10 years old. My identical twin daughters are 6 years old, and my last son is 11 months old. I'm trying to secure a spot for my school-age kids, which unfortunately, as we know, was not included in SWELC and was a huge oversight of the program. My son is currently in full-time childcare, although today he is home with me since he's sick. And he's at the York Humber location with the Learning Enrichment Foundation, which has already been noted is very unfortunately going to have to go through cuts and some restructuring to sustain their operations. I'm advocating for SWELC funding allocations that will ensure the sustainability of childcare in the City of Toronto. So this has already been mentioned by other debutants, but this is important. So just going to quickly reiterate 4 key changes to SWELC that I kindly ask City Councillors to push for. 1, provide adequate operating funding to bring wages and benefits for all childcare staff up to the City of Toronto wage schedule and cover the actual cost of rent, occupancy, food, and other program costs for 2024 and beyond. 2, provide major capital funding that reflects actual construction costs to expand nonprofit and public childcare in underserved areas and build the 3,100 promised spaces in Toronto schools. 3, introduce a new provincial funding formula for adequate sustained funding that recognizes the actual operating costs of childcare in Toronto. And 4, increase fee subsidies to help lower income families access childcare. So very quick and simple summary, the key issue here is wages and the cost of living in Toronto, which we know and has been highlighted everywhere over and over is vastly discordant. The SWELC funding fails to account for inflation at its actual rate. Many families, such as myself, have benefited from the reduced fees through SWELC. After putting my first 3 kids through daycare for full fees, I can attest to how helpful these reduced fees truly are. However, this benefit shouldn't then be compromising the quality and accessibility of childcare. As a mother, I really do not want to have to choose between quality childcare versus affordable daycare. Thank you all for your time and support.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions of the debutant? Seeing none, thank you for joining us at committee. Sultana Jahangir is next, is online, and that will, she will be followed by Michelle Lau. Sultana, welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes. Sultana Jahangir.
Hello.
Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hello.
Yes, you may speak for 5 minutes now.
So,
welcome.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, you may speak. Hello? You have 5 minutes. Please speak. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
So can you please, do you hear me?
Yes, you have 5 minutes to speak. I'm going to run your time. Okay. We're going to move on to the next speaker.
Hello, do you hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry for this thing.
You,
My
you
system
have
has
5 minutes to speak.
Okay. Thank you, the chairperson of this committee, and thank you to giving us an opportunity to talk about the roundtable update. So my name is Sultana Jahangir. I'm the executive director of South Asian Women's Rights Organization, and we are located community-based women-led organization and located in East Danforth community. And we the representative of racialized immigrant women, and our area is already identified as a neighborhood improvement area by City of Toronto. So we feel it like through the long advocacy work for childcare, since we started as an organization, we find it out that always there is exclusion for our community, and we want to address this exclusion. I feel it like the rolling of the Canada-wide early learning initiative might going to be excluded some people, and we want to address this exclusion, especially for the Scarborough, because we see that whole Toronto 0 to 9 years old children, we have more than 250,000, and we have only 80,000 spaces available. That looks like a lot of children will going to be excluded. That means like 32%.
Just 1 second, I'm gonna pause your time. Can you just move the microphone a bit further away from your mouth? It's very loud and difficult to hear.
Okay, sorry.
That's much better, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for this thing. So I just want to mention that we are in a community that is already identified as a neighborhood improvement initiative area where lots of racialized immigrant women are living. We always feel that when the childcare money or childcare implementation is coming, we feel it that the racialized precarious employed immigrant women will going to get more exclusion. And one of the exclusion, we find it out in the Scarborough area, that there is a issue in our community is we have lots of children, but very less spaces available. So we know that whole Toronto has more than 250,000 children, but only 80,000 spaces available. That means like out of this 250,000 children, only 32 spaces available. That is, and in Scarborough, that percentage is already 20%. So we find it out in our area, especially East Danforth community area, there is a huge amount of children, those who need childcare support, but there is a very few childcare center. And also we find it out that women, those who are interested to go for work or interested to update their skill, they are not getting enough childcare subsidy right now to moving forward. So total childcare is related with women economic issue. So our concern is like, we feel it like, especially the precariously employed immigrant women, racialized women are getting excluded from the government support. We need a very inclusive measurement, so then childcare subsidy could be available right away. We cannot wait until they are rolling the, all universal childcare.
Sorry, please don't hold the microphone close to your mouth that we can't hear. Okay, go ahead.
We requested immediate action to get the childcare, subsidies more in our community, so that our communities can access the childcare space and childcare support, so then they can go to the work. I am requesting that if it's possible, anytime if anyone can come to our office, they can find it out that we are flooded with the racialized immigrant women. Every single day they're coming. The refugee, newcomer, women in under poverty, and they're requesting that how they are going to go back to work. And every single day we find it out that their main barrier is the childcare. And we are sending childcare subsidy application every single time, but we are not finding out that much acceptance in here. And also it will going to be happen in future also, because when we roll that $10 a day childcare, we're going to find it out that lots of people are going to be excluded. They cannot pay this day fee or weekly $50 or $100 for the children. So our main concern is we need still more childcare subsidy and also more center in this area. We find it out lots of non-profit organizations could hold the spaces, but there is no funding allocated to the nonprofit organization to open or making a childcare center surrounding them, because we have already trust in the community. And our high-rise building area, we are not finding enough government initiative to build a new childcare center. So, and also I totally echo with Donna that service also want to work with the
Thank you.
city
10
to
more
do the advocacy
seconds.
work. Advocacy work with the other level of government, like provincial and federal government. So we also want to connect it with City of Toronto and requested Alejandro to send us all the
Thank you.
opportunity
Please
where
wrap up.
communities, women can address the leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, the next deputant is Michelle Lau. Michelle Lau is online. Michelle Lau, welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hi there, can everyone hear me?
Yes, you have 5 minutes. Welcome to committee.
Hi there, committee. Nice to meet you. My name is Michelle. I am a parent of a toddler in a daycare in the Davenport area. Today, I just wanted to come and quickly address the group and speak from a parental perspective. I guess, first of all, I wanted to thank the federal, provincial, and all municipal levels supporting this program and in providing $10 a day subsidy. It's truly been a game changer for parents and mothers like myself who obviously have been able to access daycare spots and be able to go back and to work. Our daycare provider is like a village to us, and it's been tremendously helpful in more ways than one. The challenge, obviously, that we are all facing today is that our daycare providers, like many others, have had to face hard choices. There have been multiple members of my network who've lost access to subsidized daycare spots because daycare operators have not been able to find a sustainable economic model. Our daycare ourselves is operating at a deficit and have announced hard decisions in trying to reduce spots or reduce caregiver pay to be able to balance their budget and have a sustainable funding model. That's, heartbreaking in more ways than one. Caregiving is a tough enough job as it is. It's challenging, it's so critical. And even this morning, as I was walking into daycare with my daughter, it was just heartbreaking talking to the caregiver in terms of the reduction in pay. But on the flip side, obviously, that's not anyone's fault in terms of the organization that we're working with. So I'll end my remarks relatively early. I just wanted to provide a parental perspective to this conversation and ask this group to enable us to not take parents' villages away and to find a sustainable business model in any way, shape, or form to allow access to broader caregiver and childcare spots and enable our caregivers who we value so much to be able to meet the kind of very, very high cost of living it is to operate in Toronto, and also to enable parents like us who want to go back to work and are happy to go back to work to be able to provide us with that breathing room. I think this group.
Thank you very much for your deputation, and great to see the tremendous advocacy from Davenport and all of the wonderful words that are being shared, I think, in relation to care workers and caregivers who are really what this service is about. Thank you very much. The next deputant is Elisa Martinez Reyes. Is Elisa online? Welcome to committee. I know I saw you there earlier and then I got confused. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning, members of the Community and Economic Development Committee. Many thanks for the opportunity to address you today. And special thanks to Councillor Bravo for bringing together Toronto's childcare sector this past March to discuss the challenges that we have faced throughout the initial implementation of CWOC. We would like to acknowledge the LEF families and staff that are here with us today. On behalf of LEF, we would like to thank each of you for the immense support for early childhood educators and the sector as a whole. As it has been expressed repeatedly today, and it is noted in the Roundtable report, CWOC does not cover the true cost of quality care as it is currently being administered by the province. We need a funding model that acknowledges equity, diversity, and inclusion of all the children and their families, and that provides strong supports to effectively respond to the unique needs of every child. In addition, we need a funding model that acknowledges the wealth of knowledge, skills, and the work of our workers. We need a system that supports a living wage in Toronto. The Roundtable report also notes that the city should do more to advocate for changes to provincial guidelines and program design, and we add our voices to that request. And we respectfully ask this committee to support city staff that are involved in the administration of management of CWOC funding to help us advocate for funding that upholds equity, diversity, and inclusion for all, including living wages for workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your deputation and for being here today. Are there any questions of the deputant? Thank you. The next deputant is Janet Davis. Janet Davis is online. Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm not on screen. That's okay. First of all, thank you very much for providing an opportunity to once again talk about the very real challenges in childcare in the City of Toronto and across the province. And I want to thank Councillor Bravo and Children's Services staff for continuing to address them, and the challenges are accurately reflected in the report that is before you. However, we don't have solutions posed before us, nor do we have before us recommendations about how we are going to take on these challenges with the province and with the federal government, and what role the city can play with some new and innovative approaches. So I've submitted a written brief, and it focuses primarily on the school-based capital projects that have been put on hold. And in particular, I have focused on Scarborough. As you know, the provincial government promised funding and approved 51 childcare projects for the City of Toronto that would have created 3,100 new spaces in the areas that are most underserved and that are have highest needs populations. As you also know, the provincial government has not funded the actual cost of those projects, and they are all of them on hold. Both the province, the capital, Catholic and public boards. So the TDSB in particular put forward a compromise to ask for funding, use the existing approved funding to fund 15 childcare projects, and the Minister of Education has rejected those proposals. I think it's incumbent on the City of Toronto to step in and play a leadership role to broker some kind of solution here. Scarborough in particular, 13 out of 15 of the Scarborough, of the childcare projects that are shovel ready, designed with building permits, are in Scarborough. And I think that it is critical that these childcare projects get built if we are going to meet our expansion targets under the provincial CWELP agreement. So I have suggested that there ought to be some kind of a summit that the mayor and the chair of economic development convene some kind of discussions with the chairs of all of the school boards and the new Minister of Education. We now have a new minister, and potentially there are opportunities here to look at some solutions. So that is one recommendation. Secondly, I think we do need an update report that really provides us with what is going on in the sector, a sort of state of the nation report. How many LEFs are there? What is the funding gap between what centers have asked for and what the provinces has provided? How many centers are on the financial brink? We haven't seen that information in a rolled up fashion to understand how vulnerable is the sector right now. We also don't know how many expansion spaces there are that have been achieved. And the City of Toronto is required to create 11,000, actually it's 18,000 if you include the childcare spaces in schools. So where are we in achieving the targets for growth? The last report we had on growth was in November of 2023, and I do believe that there should be an update report come directly to Council that gives us a snapshot of the situation in the sector. I don't think there is another division in the City of Toronto that has over 1,000 contracts with small businesses that are all hanging in the balance, who are providing important services to vulnerable residents, our children and our families. And when you asked, Chair, what is it that we need and want? I do think the City of Toronto needs to come forward with a very good report that shows us where's the deficiency in funding and what do we need to address it, to address the staffing crisis, the financial crisis, the capital growth crisis. And finally, I would say, lastly, even in the past, when we were under a great deal of financial pressure, and I note that the budget chief is there, and I say hello, to my colleagues, we did continue to contribute. We continued to contribute and made a commitment to 20% contributions. And I do believe that the city can and should continue with a financial commitment to childcare.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
Are there any questions of the deputant? Okay. Thank you for coming. The next speaker is deputant is Catherine Layton, followed by Sue Colley, and then Katie Wren. Is Catherine online? Welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine Layton. I have 2 sons, aged 5 and 18 months, in the Learning Enrichment Foundation program, and they're located at Perth School, and I live in the Davenport ward. Finding reliable, safe, affordable, and licensed childcare in the city is like finding pokeroo. I am extremely fortunate to be in the LEF, and my children to be in the LEF program. They provide excellent childcare, and they are part of the CWELCC. As others mentioned, last week we received a letter from the executive director communicating some of the impacts the CWELCC is having on them, with frozen fees ultimately driving them into a deficit. This is so deeply concerning on so many levels. I'm concerned that the LEF program is going to be forced to leave CWELCC, which has benefited our family so greatly. We would be paying over $1,000 more a month if they were to leave the program. In addition, and even more concerning, I'm concerned for the workers. We've all experienced the challenges associated with inflation. Salaries should be increasing, not decreasing. And we know that they're not being compensated appropriately before. So having this decrease is shameful. I'm concerned about the quality of care ultimately that we're going to be able to provide our children if we are underfunding these critical programs. And long term, I'm concerned for the City of Toronto's childcare infrastructure. We need to be adding spots, not stressing our existing infrastructure to the point of potentially losing them. And I think we're looking at this problem, if we look at this problem from a really large macro scale, if we lose our childcare programs and they all go out, the larger financial implications of parents staying home to take care of these children is going to be even more significant. So I think we need to be taking action now ultimately on this, and it's a deep concern. So LEF has made some recommendations ultimately to help us remediate the situation. And I would ask that counselors, that you do everything in your power to act now. Wages and decreases are coming into effect now. This is impacting our workers today. And so we need to be taking immediate action. This can't be something that is going to be tabled for a month or 2 months. Imagine if your salary was being cut. It would be awful. As counselors, I know that you are constantly faced with so many sort of different requests and balancing different needs. I hope that we can agree that prioritizing early learning education is absolutely critical. Our children are our future. We know the impacts that good childcare can have on children's long-term success. Please take the next necessary action to ensure that they can thrive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and wonderful to also see all this advocacy from Davenport. Are there any questions of the deputant? I think some of the issues that are being raised on LEF in particular will be addressed in questions to staff. The last two speakers are deputants, I should say, are Sue Colley and Katie Wren. Sue Colley online. Welcome, Sue Colley, you have 5 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you also for the councillors of the Economic and Community Development Committee for having me to speak at the last minute. I first of all should say that Building Blocks for Childcare, who I represent today, is an organization that was created to support the expansion of childcare, because we all know it's not possible to do this kind of work off the side of your desk. But however, the expansion has stalled, and it's not due to the city, nor is it due to the centres, nor is it due to the staff or the parents. It's firmly, the burden of guilt, I have to say, is firmly in the hands of the provincial government. And that's where we need to take very serious action. There are 3 things happening that's creating this crisis. One is that there are no guaranteed revenues, and that the revenues that are being received by operators are actually the same as they were, plus 4.75%, as they were on March the 27th, 2022. Since then, by the Ontario Budget Office own figures, inflation has been 13.5%. It's absolutely no wonder that these centres are in crisis and having to take drastic action. And I have to say that I am so impressed with how many operators have stretched themselves in the way that childcare has historically done to try to make it work. They have been quiet, really. They have been very self-sacrificing. They've rather closed rooms or cut back and scrimped and saved, rather than saying, this, enough is enough. And I think today we're really challenged with the fact that enough is enough. And I would like to suggest, I agree with Janet's idea of the summit, that would be great. And I do think we need more comprehensive reports from the city, so we're able to advocate more effectively in the city. But I also think that we really ask the mayor, Olivia Chow, to do her magic with Doug Ford, and she really needs to sit down with him and seriously discuss what the future of childcare is going to be in this province, because many of us don't believe that the province is serious about wanting the whole Canada-wide early learning and childcare strategies to survive. We think they want other strategies to work, and they're biding their time so that they can bring in new avenues, which will not be as good as this one, despite its difficulties. So thank you very much for hearing me today. And I do hope that you will, as you have passed in the past, you passed resolutions to do more advocacy from the city to the province. I hope that you will take that up once again. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Well, thank you for being here. The final deputant is Katie Wren. Katie is online. Welcome to committee, Katie Wren. Welcome, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. I am just calling in, similar to many of the other parents who have spoken earlier today. I am a working mother of a toddler who's enrolled in the LEF program in my area, Jane and Eglinton. And I just wanted to speak out today because I have personally seen the impact that the wage cuts have already taken at my center, both on the childhood educators as well as the higher up staff in the facilities. As it's already been alluded to by many other parents, this is really hard, difficult work, long hours, often goes underappreciated, and the least we could do is provide these early childhood educators with reasonable pay. Since the LEF budget cuts have been announced, you know, I've been dropping and picking up my son, and I see less familiar faces because I understand that some of the childhood educators are very frustrated and are considering other options. I've seen the ones that are present looking quite tired and forlorn, and the least I can do is call in today and speak because they deserve to be paid fairly for the work they do. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your deputation and for joining us. Thank you to all the deputants. We're going to go now to questions of staff, and I'd like to go to Vice Chair Carroll first.
Oh, thank you. So I want to ask a couple, I may go over 5 just a little bit, but we did that once already. First, foundationally, we have our city-run centers, and then we have purchase of service centers. Today, we're hearing mostly from one center, and that's a Learning Enrichment Foundation is a purchase of service center, is it not?
Excuse me. Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, you know, we've talked a lot about, in your report, we talk a lot about the impact of the pace at which the province is rolling out the $10 a day program, and its impact on the conventional not-for-profits there, some of the new so-called for-profit, none of them are really for-profit. I hate that we have to use that terminology, but the adjustments are still going on. But given that these are, we administrate the QUELC program and advise and all of that for all of these purchase of service centers in exchange for our access to put subsidized spaces there. But can you tell me, how much can we influence if the center takes a decision to change wages for the workers? Is that a governance decision that they've made, or is that something that we can impact?
Through the chair, in terms of the service agreements, operators submit an annual budget, and which includes the salaries that they project for their workers. Obviously, prior to Canada-wide, they would have raised their revenue through parent fees to cover those costs. So with Canada-wide and the revenue coming from the province, there are definitely constraints around the amount or the level of salary increases. In 2022 and 2023, or 23-24, there was a cumulative 4.91% cost of living increase, which was meant to address, partially address salary increases that were selected by the operator.
Right, but and that wouldn't have realistically in Toronto cost of living that was inadequate from the get-go. That wouldn't have been enough to really cover costs, especially for people who are working at this wage level, where inflation has a greater impact. That wouldn't have been an adequate increase.
Through the chair, no, but I must point out that in addition to the 4.9%
2% cost of living increase. There's also provincial wage enhancement funding that funds salaries directly to the lowest paid. There's also workforce compensation funding that again adds additional funding to bring those salaries up. You know, we don't particularly love the strategy that the province put forward that created a wage floor. We've requested through council that there be, you know, a strategy that includes a salary scale with progressive positions. That is not what we have, but I do need to point out that the funding they receive comes in various envelopes, and part of that is enveloped strictly for compensation.
So is that where your children's services can come in? Well, those are coming from the province. If there's a problem understanding, accessing them, or how they play out, how you can forecast, well, they flow directly to that center. If they're struggling with that, they can come in and you help them work out a plan? Am I understanding that correctly? Because that's been my experience in the past. I'm assuming that's still the case with QUEL.
Yes, and through the chair, since the transformation began, we've been abundantly clear, you know, in every conversation that any operator that is struggling and demonstrates a financial need, then we will sit down and work with them to try and identify where some of those concerns are and try to address those. And that has been the case for the past couple of years, and we continue to make that offer and regularly meet with operators to look at their operating plan and their budgets and see how, if they have concerns, how they can be addressed.
Right. So we can, you know, we have the resources in children's services. You have people who could say, give me your last financial statements, give me your operating budget for this year. I have a deep expertise in what's available from the province. Let's pull this all together at this table right now. And that's the kind of service you can provide. You could provide here to LEF.
That is correct. In fact, we require every agency that has an agreement with us to provide their audited financial statements. We also, if there is an issue, we ask them to provide their most current financial statements so we can understand if the concern is a cash flow issue, or is it, you know, what the deep issue is, so that we can work to resolve it.
Okay. I had one more question, but I'll just sort of cover it in my comments, unless you want me to ask it. Well, one more question, because we also had deputations that asked us to look at the overall piece. I very much thank Susan Colley for placing the blame where it goes. But with respect to that, yes, we have some issues ourselves system-wide with the way the province is rolling itself, the way they structured the deal with the federal government, holus bolus. But is it fair for me to say we had our own plan before we went to the $10 a day rollout? We had our own plan. What we wanted to do was reduce fees for users, including full fee paying parents. We wanted to raise the wage level of the workers within, and we wanted to expand spaces. Isn't it true that we entered into, let us help make this QUELC a success, because those three things we were told were their goals as well? Is that not true?
That is correct. In fact, the province's pillars for the program include the workforce, valuing the workforce, capital growth and expansion, affordability. But to be honest, I have to say, in the first year of the rollout, approximately 98% of the new funding went directly to affordability to reduce those parent fees. So what we need now is some balance in terms of investing in those other pillars. So the capital investment and the workforce investment to ensure that families can access those programs.
And how often are you meeting with them to tell them, with respect to all three pillars, we're still not feeling it?
Yeah. Well, you'll note that their province is launching a new funding formula. We expect to have the details sometime this summer. And they acknowledge that the original funding model that they introduced, the revenue replacement, was problematic and was not meeting. Yep, they've publicly acknowledged that, and hence the new funding formula. But to understand the conversations, Toronto is one of the co-chairs of the Provincial and Municipal Technical Table, so I'm engaged with them at least monthly, if not more. We also attend the Urban Commissioners Table, where people across the province bring those issues forward. There's been surveys that have gone out to parents. We do regular town halls to provide updates, and we work really closely with OMSA, which supports service system managers across the province, and AMO. So together, we have a lot of opportunities to inform and influence, and we take what we hear from families and what we hear from council and what we hear from operators, we take it to that table.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? I have a couple of questions. We have a motion to extend till 1. Okay, moved by Vice Chair Carroll. All in favor? Adopted. To Children's Services, how much money has been requested from the province through emerging needs funding? Like, essentially, how much money has been requested from emerging needs funding but was not deemed eligible to be repaid because of the province's criteria for emerging needs?
So through the chair, we requested approximately $30 million from the province for emerging issues funding. Just to point out, though, that is just one stream of funding. So in addition to that, there's affordability funding, there's cost escalation funding, provincial workforce. I mean, it couldn't be more complicated, more quite frankly. However, there's a number of different funding streams that support operators. The Emerging Issues Fund is defined as being able to address new emerging issues that are non-discretionary and have not been addressed through the other funding streams. So we requested $30 million. There was a shortfall of $5.7 million. We subsequently, at the end of June, made another request to have that full $5.7 million provided to us, and we're waiting to hear back on that.
So for people that have deputants that have come and said, we want to know what it is that you're asking for at the table, we pushed for $30 million. There was a shortfall, and the Children's Services continues, and the City of Toronto continues to push for the full amount. Could you tell me what advocacy Toronto Children's Services has been doing in regard to the provincial funding formula and ongoing challenges with the implementation of Canada-wide? And maybe go a little bit deeper into what were the priorities of Children's Services identified for the funding formula?
Right, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but as I noted to Councillor Carroll, we do sit at the Provincial Municipal Technical Table. We attend the Urban Commissioners meetings. There was a Ministry's Advisory Table that was struck, and City of Toronto was there, and that also included a number of operators from the community. We hold regular town halls to seek feedback from operators and share updates that we can. We work with OMSA and AMO to really coordinate those responses, so the City of Toronto and the voices of the other service system managers. And then we listen, we advocate through council. We've had a number of motions that council has put forward and adopted. And we listen, obviously, to our partners in the community, and we take that, what we hear, and we bring that to those various groups. But I can assure you, we meet quite regularly.
And there's been some deputations that have said that the city should contribute more, and I just wanted to hone in on one particular aspect of the financial pressures on Children's Services Division. Can you explain how the division's capacity has or will be affected as a result of what I understand is more than a $24 million cut to the administration costs, the sunk costs of being a system service manager? What's the gap? What is the impact?
Through the chair. So we do continue to advocate for restoration of that funding. That is part of the ongoing conversations with the acknowledgement that rolling out such a major transformation requires resources. I'm confident that we're going to see some positive change in that regard, but that's not confirmed at this point. In terms of what we're doing to manage, so Over the years, if you look in our budget, you'll see that we've already implemented a number of efficiencies in our program, and which has been valuable because we knew that this was a potential outcome. So we've already implemented, we have some mitigation strategies, but really it comes down to sometimes prioritizing what we're being asked to do. And a good example is the province has asked us to consider entering into cross-jurisdictional agreements so families living outside of Toronto can come to Toronto and access a childcare space and a Toronto fee subsidy. So we have said we are not resourced appropriately to do that. It's a huge piece of work, and the reality is, with the waiting list the size of Toronto's, we would do all that work and the family would then sit on a waiting list. So we're pushing back to say, you know, we're going to have to prioritize what you ask us to do, and this is not important to us in Toronto, and so it's going to go to the bottom of the list.
And finally, there are a lot of concerns that came out of my ward with the Learning Enrichment Foundation at Carleton Village and in other locations. Is it accurate to say that you have been meeting with the executive director and have offered support? And so perhaps we can provide more information directly to the debutants once we go offline, that there has been, Children's Services has offered assistance. Is that correct?
Yeah. Through the chair, I'd like to thank everybody who came today and shared their stories. But I want to assure them, not just that agency, we have been meeting with LEF frequently. In fact, we have a meeting this afternoon with their executive director. And, you know, I'll be very clear, throughout this entire transformation, we have said to people, if you are in trouble and you can demonstrate a need, then we will work with you to try and mitigate that to the best of our ability. So that those conversations are happening, and we look forward to working with them to see if there's some solutions or resolutions.
Right. Thank you very much. Now, any other questions of staff? Let's go to speakers. Will you be speaking, Vice Chair? Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly. First of all, I want to thank you for convening the roundtable, Madam Chair, because it's clear we need that, and maybe on a regular basis, because there were the struggles with understanding how the early learning program was going to run. We waited for a long time just to have an Ontario deal, and then 5 minutes later, it was an unprecedented challenge in lockdowns happening, and a lot of people, if you didn't have a child in childcare, you really didn't realize the challenge there, where Shanley had to be very nimble about making sure that they didn't need to just shut down altogether. That we somehow kept them whole, so that the day the lockdown was over, your center would still be there for you. So dealing with some of these issues kind of got put off for a while, because we were right away in a very unusual circumstance. So we are still struggling with this. This does still take a lot of, convened tables, as Ms. Nagami described to us, that she's sitting at province-wide and GTA-wide to try and get at how do we want to change this so that it improves the formula province-wide and really helps the city of Toronto, because that's a tricky threading of a needle as well, as we're trying to fix the overall formula so that it serves our centers, but they're very different outside of our city limits. And unfortunately, and this is hard to understand if you were so actively engaged in the older system as many of the advocates are, it's hard to understand that we now have to have that consideration to a degree that was not necessary before, because we were putting so much of our own money into it. That being said, I know there was a comment that we used to put money into it, we should still put money into it. As painful as this is, I'm fundamentally opposed to us creating a model that means that we're now flowing funds into this well beyond what's going on elsewhere in the province. Because if we do that, the structural problem that should be fixed will never get fixed. And there's only so much we can do. Save the child care province, even though the federal and provincial governments have agreed to do it, have us save the system. Oh, they can't keep their science center structure afloat, so we'll do it. They said they'd expand child care centers, but they're not doing it, so we'll do it. That, thankfully, we're in a unique position that we can, to some extent, through development, still bump a few more out, even if the formula doesn't support them. But if we keep taking it all on in an inequitable way and then turn around and say, make us whole, we've made a really bad case for ourselves, because they can say you chose to go that far and we'll never get the fix we're looking for. So I really want to say that I wish people knew just how much advocacy is going on between Children's Services in Toronto, including we would happily have sat at the table and helped them make the deal with the federal government, and it would have served us all better had they done that. No one knows more about running the system than a city that's running 100 centers, and yet they didn't avail themselves of that service. But I cannot stress enough how much advocacy is going on. I think Shanley was being modest. It's certainly more than monthly. She is tapping every connection she has throughout the system to try and get them to understand the sense of urgency of really getting this in place. We certainly want to get it in place while we're still working with the two leaders that struck this deal, provincially and federally. If there's a fundamental change there and we're far from getting to the goal that was envisioned, we'll just clearly never get there. And so the sense of urgency is being imparted by the City of Toronto constantly, that the advocates, the parents, the workers, the operators are doing so as well, can only help. But please know that we are advocating constantly. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I have a motion, and it speaks to the work that we've already been doing with the Roundtable. The motion is for a requested General Manager of Children's Services to report back to this committee in the fourth quarter of this year with an update on growth and expansion within Toronto's licensed childcare sector, ongoing implementation of Canada-wide, and an analysis of the provincial funding formula for the Canada-wide and the childcare agreement. And that's important because there's new information coming this summer that will allow for this analysis to be useful. The second part of the motion is a request to the Minister of Education to introduce Canada-wide and provincial funding formula that ensures long-term stability and viability of the childcare sector through sustainable multi-year operating and capital funding, addresses workforce compensation issues, and supports a thriving workforce, and that the expansion in the nonprofit and public sector in a way that it supports inclusion for families across the City of Toronto. We convened the Roundtable because of the recognition that there is in the City of Toronto and in Children's Services that there is a crisis in this sector. There is enormous pressures that come from a flawed funding formula, the workforce challenges that impact care work in general. And I just want to say thank you to all the deputants who spoke about what childcare means to you, what it means to be a worker in this area, and the central place that childcare centers and childcare providers have in the child development and the livelihoods of families. I can only say that I was at the same childcare center for more than 10 years because my children are that far apart in age, and those people felt very much like part of our family. The care around and the attention to care work, I think, is something that this pressure is huge in this sector. We see it also in long-term care. We see it in shelter division with the insufficient funding. This is something that we have to value more as a society. And to me, I mentioned before, the first time I ever came to depute at a city committee was more than 20 years ago, much more than 20 years ago, and it was around this question. I hoped that we would have an affordable, stable, not-for-profit, quality childcare system in time for my kids, but that never happened. I'm still here to fight alongside you. This is a piece of social infrastructure that is so incredibly powerful and foundational. It's as important as having sewer and water for people's lives. Every dollar that we put into childcare saves $3 to $5 down the road for school readiness, for better communities, for family harmony, the savings that come from all kinds of down the road social ills that are avoided. So I think we all are with you on this point. There's more work that we need to do to work alongside each other. This provincial funding formula, the inadequate rates, the way that this program has rolled out with the federal government program, provincial responsibility to fund, and the pressures on Toronto as a system operator, which is currently in the hole $24 million because of the costs. We're talking about big money, big problems. Big money that is being spent on a program that has flaws. Big money that can't be saved down the road if we don't provide adequate childcare, and huge pressure on families. I certainly experienced it myself, and I understand and I value so much the love and care that's being expressed for childcare workers today here. I think we also will be continuing to work, and I'm committed to this, identifying the ongoing citywide gaps, because it's really crucial that the province not be set up in a position where they respond in a case-by-case situation to one childcare center when there is a system-wide structural funding gap that is putting so much pressure on childcare centers, on operators, on the boards, and on the families. We need this information so that we can continue to advocate alongside each other to the provincial government, and that's not something that we're not going to stop doing. So thank you very much, and I don't know if anyone else wants to speak, or we can go to the motion. On the motion, all in favor? The item is adopted. Oh, that's it. So we are in the going to move back to the 14.3, which we have a visiting Councillor Myers here, and on that item that was held by Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher, you had questions of staff?
Councillor Bravo, can I just say one thing quickly? Sorry. Very quickly. I just want to correct something I said before.
Okay.
Sorry, so when I had said that we had spoken with staff, we'd actually spoken with clerks, so Howie and I just had a conversation outside, so now we've cleared it with Parks, Forest, and Rec. So
okay. Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, you had questions of staff?
Sorry, pardon? No, it's Fletcher. I just wanted to know, the councillors raised some really interesting questions here about the relationship between schools and parks, and as he's noted, many of these parks were built beside schools and there was an organic relationship. Is there any, that's just been the way that's been for a long time. Do you see any issues with that? And what process do you use when you're changing park equipment in an area that is beside a school? That was noted by the councillor.
Thank you for the question. So through the chair, as you've noted, there are a number of sort of cases where schools are able to sort of organically use the park. No issues of note in terms of that use, and when anything arises, we have mechanisms in place to have further conversations with the schools to rectify anything that comes up at the time or change their use based on their needs or community needs. With respect to the process of engagement with capital projects, neighboring schools are typically engaged through that process.
How were they engaged in this process where a sandbox got left behind and a toddler playground got erected?
In this process, I do know that Capitol staff reached out to the schools and invited them to provide input, schools within a 1 kilometer radius, and invited them to provide input on the process through a survey, and some did. With respect to the sandbox, I can't speak specifically to it, but can.
And the counselor at the time? Obviously, that would be a key stop for Capitol staff.
Typically it is. In this case, I'd have to confirm and let
Can
you
you
know.
confirm that? You've had all morning to get that information.
Yes, we can do that.
No, I mean now.
Oh, now. Unfortunately, I don't have that information right now.
Are those your questions, Councilor Fletcher?
Well, I'm kind of waiting for that, like the process with the counselor, because we now have a counselor that's asking for that. I'm pretty sure that's your process or your required process. So if that didn't happen, that's your problem. And if the counselor didn't do it, that's the former counselor's problem, in my mind. Can you confirm that?
Yes, we're in the process of confirming.
Process of confirming. And so, yeah, so the motion is to better coordinate, obviously, between the schools, and counselors are one of those people, one of those great resources, as Councillor Myers has just shown in his talking to the schools. So apparently that didn't really happen in this case to any degree or degree necessary. If anybody else has questions, that's fine. I'll just wait for the answer.
I have questions. Are you finished?
I'm waiting for the answer. If that counselor engagement was missed by the staff, or the engagement of the counselor didn't happen because the counselor didn't do it. Because counselor engagement in redoing playgrounds is like number one. So either that didn't happen.
So to the best of our ability, we'll get that answer from staff. If they don't have it,
it's coming now. No, she's looking it up. It's fine. I'll stop and give it over to you.
But to be fair, my ruling is that we're getting into a level of specificity they may not have felt they needed to be prepared for today.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We can check.
Okay. So are you still waiting for an answer, or are we?
No, I'm giving it to you while Ms. Bianco checks it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moyes, any questions? Yes. Okay. I do have some questions of my own. I understand I can ask the questions from the chair. Yes. The chair will be coming back. Yes. So I just want to understand, we're talking about, if we're talking about convening a discussion table and that table happens once, maybe twice, that's great. We may resolve some historical anomalies. We may have a go forward that within your already approved operation and budget, you can solve some problems. But is it clear in the motion that if we're actually setting up new agreements, changing new things, that then becomes the thing that has to come back to committee? Is that the intent of the motion insofar as staff interpret it?
Yes, so we have many channels where there's an open dialogue with the school board, and we have an open sort of forum where they're able to come to us to discuss any requests around land use. Where it gets into sort of council approval is when we're formalizing any of those relationships. So we require council approval often for entering into any agreements with the school boards.
Right. I'll use as an example where even that wasn't necessary. We developed a community garden in North York. Has the same thing. The park and the schoolyard are adjacent with no property line markings. We developed a community garden on Park's property only because the rationale for developing it was that part of the organizing group of it was the school itself. But it was on our property, so it was really just a matter of locally developing a relationship, and that was between principal of the time, a teacher who looked like she was going to be around for a while, so I was mollified in that way, and ourselves. But that didn't need even a trip to committee, let alone council. It's just a community garden starting as usual. It's just a tacit agreement in that neighborhood. So those are the types of things that can just be ironed out at a discussion table, but the discussion table doesn't become a body that now has, you know, staff assigned to it and must continue sort of thing. If you were going to turn it into, at that point, if you said, let's meet every month, it kind of becomes a program within the department. Would you not then have to come to council and say, we are setting up this body?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a formal sort of change to any existing process or policy, like the community garden policy, we have a number of mechanisms that we can engage with school boards at a local level on. A change to that would require sort of that more formal process.
Okay, fantastic. Those are my questions, and Madam Chair returns just in time.
Yeah, thank you. All right, are there any speakers? Question, Councillor Moyes?
You know, I just find it very odd because as a former school trustee, you know, we have community use benefits, you know, with the school and the community in the city. For example, if Section 37 funds were used to revitalize a playground, then because Section 37 funds were used, the community could actually use that space, right? Another example, and there's a question coming. Another example is our school pools. The city has an agreement with the school board where, you know, it could be programmed and community comes and use it. But here we are now in the reverse. So why is it so disjointed? Why can't we sort of just look at it in a holistic way and just sort of, you know, use public assets for community use?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I mean, there are sort of separate rules governing school boards versus the city, and there are impacts to sort of public use of city space when school boards use that space. And so it's a matter of balancing the needs of the schools with the needs of the city and the public that sort of require that open dialogue which exists, but also sometimes requires more sort of formalization of those arrangements.
All right.
Councillor Myers?
Thank you. And I was just wondering, through you, Chair, could you please confirm if there are any sort of formal arrangements between the city and any of the school boards in Ward 23 for use of the parks that are adjacent to schools?
That's 2 minutes fast, according to...
We'll have to get back to you on the specific locations of the parks that are being used under agreement.
Okay.
By the schools in that ward.
Thank you. And can you confirm that these types of agreements do exist in other jurisdictions within the City of Toronto?
They do exist in other jurisdictions on a few occasions.
And these are, and also, how do these agreements generally come to being? Are they negotiated as sort of one-offs, or is there some sort of formal place where this is done?
For the use of parks by schools specifically, it is they're generally one-off arrangements when an agreement is requested by the school board. Schools also have the ability to take out permits in all of the parks at a sort of more holistic level in city parks for specific use of park assets.
Thank you. And so final question, just to confirm, there's no formal mechanism for which a counselor, a principal, a school board trustee could initiate this type of conversation. They all kind of just happen as one-offs, if they do happen.
Typically, we work with the real estate arm of the respective school boards, and so those conversations go from the trustee or principal at the local level to the boards, and we have the conversation with them at a holistic level about their needs of city space.
Correct, but there's no, for example, there's nothing on the city's website that would show how to start this type of conversation.
Not on the city's website
or any other information that would show how these types of agreements come into being. You'd have to sort of like be entrepreneurial and approach the city and find the right person at the city to start dealing with this, correct?
For the agreement specifically, yes. However, sometimes principals are reaching out to our permit teams and have an avenue into the city when requesting more robust use of space.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to have a motion to extend to finish the agenda. All those in favor? Okay, opposed? We're going to continue. To speak, Councillor Vice Chair Carroll.
So we're grappling with this, and we're probably making the councillor nervous. But here's the thing. Having asked my questions about this is another one of. This is just lessons in how to do the one of, setting this discussion table up. But I'm a big fan of the one of with these relationships. We have a track record as long as my arm of trying to set up a formal thing that will always work for every anomalous situation where we want to interact between these two properties with the school board. It doesn't go very well. I can take it all the way back to the early post-amalgamation administrations of the school board on up. There's a thing that happens when you pull together our staff and their staff, and we both think we're broke, and things get very difficult. So the one of, that organic thing that happens just because the councillor in some local communities and the staff who are charged and have the operating oomph to help you with a thing like that, or when you get the things done that you want to get done in unique ways. I use the example of my community garden. It had one person who wanted to do it outside of the school population, and that's not enough. That doesn't meet our guidelines for animation. But could we work out a local community agreement with the school? We did. Never came to a community, didn't need a giant table. It did need one meeting where we got together and said, is someone going to deal with this if the principal and the teacher retires? Who will deal with it? We got a commitment with someone actually participating by telephone. A superintendent said, yes, of course, we would not let something just fall to ruin after we leave. And yes, it's right close to our property line, but you can do it. In the next school over, there was a path that used to go down the city property through a park and was shoveled to a certain point, and it met up with a staircase on the school property. And the path became in such a state of repair that we needed to fix it. But the school board said, no, we have no plans to fix our stairs. And so the city, the parks person working with me and myself said, well, we're not fixing your stairs for you. I'm paying for the path on city property. I've got just enough Section 37 from this development to do that. Building stairs is expensive. You guys should want to fix them. But since you don't, we're going to design the path in a little bit different way. We got there in the end. We all agreed. Funnily enough, they're now putting a wheelchair ramp where the broken stairs used to be. But all of that happened. The whole of that solution happened without stepping outside of the bounds of what you just do in the normal course of operations, calling the right staff department and Janie Romoff was a big help, and your capital program was a big help, and the money came from development. Those one-ofs are the way you get the solution to be a perfect fit for the community that's asking for it. And I have reservations about a table that becomes a long-standing month after month thing, because it now starts to build a structure that has to have certain guidelines. And the next thing you know, the guidelines can't account for every anomalous thing that you might be able to do in a lovely way. So I can support this motion, Madam Chair, but I'm supporting it because I asked that question. Does staff understand this to be a thing that needs to happen in this area to do some problem solving in the short term? And if it was going to turn into a thing, a program, if you will, they'd come back to us. That's the basis on which I am willing to support this motion, and not just as budget chief, from an equity perspective, because that is the way most of us go about these unique solutions. So if we want to do it this way, this is a way of doing this particular one of, I would still expect if it became longstanding that it came back here to explain why it had to be longstanding. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Moyes?
Very quick. Again, the school board seems to have a process as to how the public access their facilities, but we don't seem to have one that's, reciprocal. I also want us to remind us too that during COVID, there was understanding between the city and the school boards that the school boards can actually use their parks because of the pandemic and some of the issues we had during that time. In my ward, we have one school, Winchester School, which is actually right next to Winchester Park. And the kids use that facility all the time. I know there's some tension between the community and the school because it's being used back and forth. But again, I think, we need to look at this more holistically, and I will support Councillor Meyer's motion, but again, it's not just a Scarborough issue. It's I think in other areas of the city too, there's some stresses as well. So I hope staff keeps that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. To speak, Councillor Fletcher?
Yeah, I will also support that on the same basis as Councillor Carroll has said. Let's not institutionalize something that should be pretty simple based on if there's any problems or what I heard the problem to be, which is the city tore down a playground and built a dumbed-down playground and the school didn't know. And that's why I asked, what was your process for building a new playground? And our Councillor Myers is very active on parks and playgrounds and wants to make sure that they're of the highest quality and that he's able to bring everybody together. If that is, and I know he will be doing that. I'll just give you an example of when the school board playgrounds all got torn down in the year 2000. I won't go into that. As the chair, Councillor Carroll and I both got elected on that. That in some cases, those playgrounds were in a city park and they tore the playgrounds out of a city park and then they have been put back in the city park. So these organic relationships between the school board and the schools and the parks are things that I think are really important. And we also understand that it's not like they have a lot of money. The school boards are squeezed, they've got tremendous cuts. So I don't institutionalize something that's going to take up a lot of work. I'd rather find that in the capital program, if there's any touching of any city facilities that are anywhere near a school, that there is a robust process that includes the local councillor to lead that. And that's my expectation. And I know we did that, well, when you're adding a new school and there's an existing park, that's different. But these relationships exist everywhere. Sometimes the city's using the school, the neighborhood's using the schoolyard. Other times the park is the city's park and the school's using it. And there's many different examples. So I know in most cases through the school day, that's a park, that's a school park, and after hours, that is the community park. That seems to be the kind of rule of thumb that's being used. If I was Councillor Myers and someone had torn out a nice playground and put one that didn't meet the age requirements, I would be very upset as well. And so if that happened, I would also expect, Councillor Myers, that your capital works would come to you and that whatever's necessary would be rebuilt there in consultation with the rest of the students and the school community. You didn't move that, but you should have moved that. Replace what was there with a robust community consultation with the local councillor, the community, and the school community. If you want to move that at some point, I'm very happy to move that for you here or at the infrastructure committee. But just as Metrolinx got a lot of freebies from the Parks Department for Jimmy Simpson, I'm expecting the Parks Department to make good now on their giving away of access to Metrolinx to build their above-ground Ontario line, which they could not do without using our property, and we got nothing for it. So this is, you're an active councillor. I think that's probably a great thing to do. My advice to you is spend your time getting that done, show how it's done, and then do that in all the other parks in Ward 22. Do I have that right? 23, 24, 23. In Ward 23, Skidoo. In Ward 23, make that example of how you're going to do that. Believe me, nobody's going to tear anything out again in your ward.
Thank you. On the item, all in favor? That is adopted. We have two items to add to the agenda, and I think that they should be fairly quick. EC 14.14, making business license and permit applications easier. That's been circulated to all council offices, all member offices. All in favor of adding it to the agenda? Opposed? That's added. And the second item is a new item being brought by Councillor Fletcher. The motion is displayed, bridging the gap, bringing context to discussions on a fixed link. This has to do with the Portlands, and perhaps Councillor Fletcher would like to speak to that. Do we voting yes, adding it to the agenda? All in favor? Opposed? That's added. So we go to 14.14, making business license and permit applications easier. I circulated a letter. I think that many of you know that there are a number of situations that have taken place in my ward and other wards where there are some challenges to how business licensing is understood by the public, some silos that are occurring in relation to all of the different dimensions of how we do licensing. It isn't just for commercial ventures, but also for community initiatives. It's been very rewarding to work with municipal licensing to staff to put this together. And I think the objective here is to have a very clear and simple way to access the licensing once complying with the requirements, that be transparent and available to the public and that people can see what's there. So are there any questions of myself as mover? Any questions of staff? No? To speak? I already did that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the final item, bridging the gap, bringing context of discussion on a fixed link, which I believe is now EC 14.15.
Yeah, I found it, but I just need a second to read it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I should have pre-circulated that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Having read the motion, does anyone have any questions of staff? Seeing none. Any speakers?
Yes, I'd just like to have this motion because the discussion of the government management, the master plan and the fixed link and everything else, what's been missing from that discussion is the actual use of the Eastern Gap by Ports Toronto, by cruise ships, by freighters, the impact on the economy of what looks like a simple idea, which is actually extremely complicated. And nobody has brought that into the discussion yet, Madam Chair. And I'm quite concerned about that because it appears to be a very simple thing to just drop a bridge. It would have to be a lift bridge. They're very expensive. And Ports Toronto It's Ports Toronto property, it's not our property that it would be going for. So it's extremely complex and complicated physically and from an economic development impact stance for the city. And I'd like to have that actually dealt with up front and first, so that we understand any of the consequences in advancing that any further. And that's what that's for here today.
Right. I just needed to read it to know that. It's an extremely well-written motion.
Thank you too.
Any other, no other speakers? Seeing none, all in favor?
And Nicholas Valverde.
Opposed? That
Shadow
is
clerk.
carried.
Thank you.
I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn from Councillor Moyes. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you so much, everyone, for sitting here until you were starving to death.